I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education for September 23rd, 2014. Present is Mrs. Eileen Lou McCormick, Mr. John Convertito, Ms. Donna Carnell, Mrs. Jessica Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer. Mr. Fatterbean is out of town on business, so will not be attending tonight. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly is at a back-to-school night in the district that she's teaching at, so she expects to join us late. Mr. John Llewellyn is present, and Mr. Mark Patton is present, so if I could have you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In keeping with the change to our bylaws where we moved public comments up to the beginning, we'll start off with those. For those of you who have not generally come to the public comment part for this, I would remind you of the agenda, that each person is limited to 2 minutes on the topic. And also remind you that we do not hear comments on individual staff members, so please do not refer to somebody by name or by title, and I don't mean that as doctor title, but by the title of any of our staff members that would therefore be personally identifiable to them. And please maintain decorum at all times. We don't have any particular order, so who's coming up first?
If I may.
Please do. Please state your name and address.
Can I sit down?
Yes, please. That's why they're there.
Okay. My name is Edward Perruta. That's P-E-R-U-T-A. I am a legal investigator for attorney Rachel M. Baird in Torrington, Connecticut. I am here tonight, and I'd like to start out like this. Hopefully everybody in this room ended the pledge with liberty and justice for all. On September 4th, an incident took place in your school district where a parent conducting himself in a legal manner was issued a summons for breach of peace. A member of your school district sent out a mass email to parents attempting to describe the incident. It has created hysteria in your community. This afternoon at 4:55 p.m. I received I opened an email which contained 112 documents, some of what I asked for in a Freedom of Information request on September 11th, 2014. In my FOI request of September 11th, 2014, I asked for prompt access to inspect public records. That's the law, to provide prompt access to inspect public records. I have been stonewalled. I've driven down here, been turned away from the superintendent's office. Fortunately, I was better received in the chief of police's office. Now, prior to my FOI request, in regards to this incident...
Excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The gentleman sitting here said that he is an investigator for legal counsel. It's my understanding we don't hear legal matters in public comment, and I'd ask that this stop now.
Well, then I'm Ed Perruta from American News.
And sir, we do hold strictly to the 2 minutes per speaker, and so your time is up from the 2 minutes. Certainly, if you have a written statement that you'd like to submit to us, you're more than welcome to do so, and just give to our clerk, and it'll get distributed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
No, you may not. It's 2 minutes is 2 minutes.
I ask for a motion to suspend the rules.
It's 2 minutes for everybody. Thank you very much. But if you have anything in writing that you'd like to submit to us, please do so.
Mr. Chairman, I have other ways of getting my information out to the public.
Yes, I'm sure everybody does. Next speaker, please. Just state your name and address.
Good evening. My name's Jenny Gillis. I'm at 230 Nichols Street in Fairfield. Good evening. I'm going to spend a minute on two issues, if you please. The first is about Whitson's. Whitson's Culinary Group provides lunches at our schools. Once a week, the entree is vegetarian. The entrees cost $2.90 at the high school. If you are a vegetarian, the policy is that to order vegetarian food on the day the entree is meat-based costs $3.85. It's considered deluxe. I question this 25% surcharge pricing and would like there to be a vegetarian option at the regular price daily, please. My second is regarding the job vacancy of Director of Elementary Education. I understand this vacant job is being served by the K-5 Language Arts Curriculum Leader. As a parent of two public school students, I see crowded classrooms and lack of space at Fairfield Ludlow High School. The extravagant resources spent on the directors don't help my children day to day. I have observed crowded classrooms and lack of space since my family joined the Fairfield public school system in 2003. Please discuss how administrative expenses could be turned over to instructional needs. Please, Dr. Title and Board, consider the redundancy of the curriculum leadership job currently in place. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Other speakers? Please state your name and address.
Hi, Wendy Bentavagna, 271 Village Lane, Southport. As we are in a few moments about to all hear the results of the RIASAP Youth Survey, have them presented to us, I just want to thank you all, the Board of Education, for supporting the continuation of the survey. There was some discussion about it in the spring, and thanks to your support, we were able to continue gathering data on youth attitudes and behaviors, which are, critical to help guide our efforts. I am the co-chair of the Fairfield Cares Community Coalition, and we use that data to help guide our efforts, and I know the schools use it and other community leaders as well. And I also want to thank RIASAP for continuing to partner with us in promoting positive youth development within the community. It truly takes a village, and I look forward to hearing the results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please come forward, state your name and address.
Trisha Donovan, Fairfield resident. Food sharing is one of the most basic social rituals that we have in our human culture, and our ability to participate in food sharing reinforces our belonging within a group. Some even use food sharing to increase their status within a group, like when a parent brings food to share in a classroom, it says, "I am a likable person." This is so ingrained in our culture that when someone cannot participate in food sharing, they are constantly reminded of their separateness from the larger group. Food use has proliferated in the school setting beyond the simple snack meant to sustain a child's energy for learning. We have PTA events that offer food rewards to classrooms, food inducements to get kids to participate in school events, cake for DARE graduation, and much more. Sometimes I wonder if our kids go to school to eat or to learn. The constant use of food in the school setting puts children with life-threatening food allergies, glycogen storage disease, or diabetes in the awkward position of constantly self-advocating before their peers and before trusted adults, further reinforcing their feelings of isolation and separation from the larger group. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is used to inform teaching and classroom management, recognizes that before a child's cognitive needs can be met, their very basic emotional and physical needs of safety and acceptance must be met. So with the proliferation of foods in schools, access to the educational setting for children with life-threatening allergies must be carefully evaluated. Last week's reaction by parents to a proposed snack protocol for life-threatening allergies, which attempts to reduce the presence of allergens in a child's learning environment, thereby satisfying safety needs, showed just how much we are tied to our feelings about food. People voice very valid concerns about cost, restrictiveness, and health, which will need to be addressed going forward. But the good work of the committee and the breadth of their diligence in creating a needs-based, comprehensive new policy that is not about food, but rather about children's safety should not be diminished. The new policy is multi-pronged and focuses on safety through prevention, education, and emergency response, hopefully the last resort. The snack protocol is a hiccup to which I am sure you will find a solution if we act together as a community in partnership. I hope the board sees this public response as an opportunity to educate themselves and all stakeholders for the sake of the children in our schools. Classrooms should be first and foremost a place of learning where all our needs for safety and inclusion are met and exemplify compassion and caring for others.
Thank you very much. And again, anybody that has a written statement that they moved through fairly quickly, and if you want to provide a copy to our secretary of the board. She'll make sure that we all get a copy of it. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. Trudy Drrell, resident of Fairfield in District 8, which would be the Holland Hill School District, and I am here tonight as a parent of Holland Hill. I am urging you to please reconsider the timeline for the Holland Hill renovation. I understand the reasons for the Holland Hill renovation and the Mill Hill renovation being pushed back. There were things that happened that could not have been foreseen in the original timeline. However, Holland Hill is already severely overcrowded. I urge you, implore you, in fact, to go visit Holland Hill during the school day and stand in the hallway. The projected numbers do not tell the true story. In 14-15, we were projected to have 395 students. Our actuals at this moment are 408. That's 10 away from the projection of 418 for next year. The projection of 438 for 16-17, we're actually 13 over our current projection. We're 10 away from the 15-16 projection, and if our numbers and trend stay steady, we average an increase of approximately 12 to 13 students every year based on the last year. Our June enrollments are definitely over. In 2011-12, at the end of the year, we were 30 over the October 1st. In 2012-13, we were 72 students over in June, and we were 89 students over our October 1st numbers last year. I'm sorry, I apologize. We were over those numbers compared to the December 2010 projection. My apologies. I'm begging you to reconsider because we have an average increase of approximately 19 students per year over the past 5 years. That's almost a class every year. It's a 23% increase since 2010. We have actual more deficiencies than Mill Hill currently. We have more staff based on the student need that we have, which corresponds to more bodies in the school, and there is nowhere else to put them. We have currently construction projects. I know, I'm almost done. We have construction projects that are done.
I'm sorry, but I have to
and 4
enforce the rules of
condominium
code.
complexes that exist in our neighborhoods now with more rentals, more multiple homes. Please reconsider.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else that wishes to address the board on a topic? Please state your name and address.
Lisa Davey, District 8. As you know, I was involved in a lot of the discussions about RISAP in the spring, and so I'm very curious about the results. But because it's a presentation, I didn't think the public would be invited to discuss anything. So I thought I might throw some questions out there to the board that perhaps they might ask if they're not addressed by Mr. Francis. One of the things I want to point out is this is not about alcohol and drugs. This is about 40 developmental assets. These are the strengths and weaknesses we have with our children. And I think that the focus of Fairfield Cares is regarding some of the substance abuse issues. In our schools, we should be focusing on how can we take those, the other issues, the things that we see as weaknesses, and empower our children, which is one of the categories. I think it's very important that the school look at what the schools can do in their charge for our children, not go outside it. That's what we have other agencies like Fairfield Cares for. I think it's also important, I know we allow RISAP to do this, and we get a lot of great information. But what can RISAP, is there anything that RISAP can offer us? I know a lot of their programs are in Bridgeport and other places, but are there any things they can offer to us in Fairfield and within our schools? I also wonder, they tell us what the results are, but do they give us any concrete advice on how to implement those results? And if not, who in our district might be examining that information? Is that, you know, done by someone particular in central office or, you know, in the schools? And how can we take that to improve? So can we look at the strengths and look at the weaknesses and say, how can we help our children? Because that's the whole point of the survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the public? If I don't, okay, I do see somebody standing up. Is this the last person, or is there somebody else that's just been waiting? I don't see anybody's hand going up at the moment, so I guess this is the last person. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name's Rachel Baird. I'm an attorney in Torrington, Connecticut. I've never appeared before this board before, so in preparation I did look at the agenda. I read the public comments and petitions section to get an idea of the ground rules. I did not see anything in there about not addressing legal issues, so if you could just reiterate that for me before I begin again, so I make sure that I abide by the board
Please
rules.
address your comments that you want in the 2 minutes, and if we think that you've strayed into something that we can't talk about, I'll let you know.
Well, what I'm going to do to ensure that I don't stray into anything that I shouldn't talk about is I received a package in response to a Freedom of Information Act request. And I would just like to read 2 excerpts from that package, and I'll be done. And that way, all I'm doing is reading FOI. I'm not making any legal arguments or presentation, and I feel like I can fit within the ground rules that way. As many of you know, my legal investigator, Ed Perruta, just mentioned it, that there was an incident at elementary school on September 4th. An email went out from the head of that elementary school. I don't want to provide a name because you indicated I should not do so. And the email was on September 4th, today we received an anonymous report that a parent was suspected to have a weapon on them during drop-off. After police investigation, it was concluded that the parent was wearing an empty gun holster. The incident was immediately reported to the police. We partnered with the police throughout the day, and there was an increase in police presence on school grounds. The school district issued a do not trespass order for this individual, therefore is not allowed on any school district property until further notice, and that was an error in the email, not in my reading. There was a response by a parent, whom I will not identify. I'm not sure I follow. Did the subject go to the school with the intent to create a disturbance, or was he involved in some sort of domestic issue? Due to the fact that he is now warned off school property, I have to assume there was more to this incident than just him dropping off his child while wearing an empty gun holster. Is the investigation still pending, or has it been concluded? Are there any other issues I need to be concerned about regarding the subject? Why did the school implement extra police patrols and warn the subject off school property? Do parents need to fear this individual will return to the school armed with a weapon? What safety measures have been put in place, if any? Should the subject return, and will his picture be disseminated to parents?
Is that the end of the sentence? Because unfortunately your time is
So he
up.
can be easily identified. Well, part of that was learning the ground rules. So let me
yes.
just conclude. Many of these same questions, we have questions about as well.
Thank you very much. Anybody else that wish to present to the board on any topic that's not on our agenda? Just for clarification's sake on Holland Hill, we are in the midst of redoing our capital plan. The last capital plan, that is the official policy of the Board of Education at the moment, was placing Holland Hill next and Mill Hill after that. When things change and we want to keep faith with the town's goal of keeping bond costs under 10% of the total budget, we are constantly shifting projects back and forth in order to show the town there is at least one scenario that keeps faith with that 10% role. That does not mean the Board of Education has changed its decision in terms of the order of priorities. But it also does not mean that this Board of Education can't, as they're reviewing and talking about the priorities for the revised capital plan, make adjustments in the plan. So for those of you who have interest in the capital plan, between now and next winter, spring, we'll be debating it over various times, and you should keep track of it. But because there's one version out there that allowed us to make sure that Riverfield and Ludlow and Osborne Hill got moved forward, does not mean that we have slipped in a change, because that we haven't. So please follow the discussion as it goes along. With no further presentations, we'll move on to public presentations. We'll move on to presentations. We have 2 tonight, the school data team presentation that Dr. Teitel will lead off, and that Mrs. Elizabeth McGoey from Stratfield will participate in, and perhaps others. We'll take not a short break, but we'll take a little bit of a break to allow the people from RIASAP to set up their PowerPoint presentation, and during that time, we will give recognition to a loyal staff member who has prepared herself for a superintendency, and it'll give us a chance to bid her a fond farewell. So, Dr. Teitel with the school data team presentation. This is based on a Board of Education's desire to have a better understanding of how data teams help us achieve student-based goals. It's not really our position to kind of manage the district, but we would like to know how this has an impact on building on quality. So, Dr. Teitel, the floor is yours.
Good, thank you. So before Ms. McGoey comes up, I wanted to explain a little bit about what I put in your packet, which is this developmental rubric page. There was a two-page enclosure. You'd seen, I think, previously we had showed you the cycle that's on the back. We talked about that a bit. And this has been an ongoing process in the district to build the capacity of schools and teachers within those schools to look at student performance data, to make adjustments in their instruction based on the data, and then measure the results of that. And this is done at a variety of levels in the organization. It's done at the individual teacher and grade level. It's done at the school level. It's done at the district level. It's also done at the department level. And I spent a couple of years as we were rolling this out observing data teams in action based on the standards for exemplary practice. And what I discovered was that people were engaged in this because it's new work for teachers and principals, honestly, that you kind of go through developmental stages as you approach this work. So while it was important for everyone to know what the target is, or at least right now what we consider exemplary, which is stage 4, understanding that many of our schools started this process back in stage 1, and that over time have worked to move themselves across the continuum from left to right. And what you'll notice as you look at the different elements here, data use, meeting structure, commitment actions, connections, and ownership, is that there's a shift as you move through this, where initially data is used sporadically. It tends to be used only by maybe the principal. There's not a lot of commitment to change to it. There's very little sharing between the school level team and the department or the grades. And that really this is work that sort of is done in the office by the principal. You know, the test scores come out, the principal examines them, and then you go from there. As you move across, you'll start to see tighter connections between the data and the school improvement plans. You'll also see a more structured meeting structure with norms and agendas and commitments that are made from people at that data team to go back and do something and report back on the results. And you'll also see more and more ownership of the process and the ultimate by every teacher in the school. But it tends not to start there. Usually starts with a smaller group, and then as the skill level develops within the school, it broadens out. And also what happens over time is that more and more of the ideas for changes in instruction bubble up from the individual teachers and the individual grade levels to the school-wide data team, as opposed to in the beginning stages where there might be a school-wide data team who's looking at data and giving instructions back to the grade levels as to what they should do. And it isn't that stage 4 is necessarily the end. I have this concept of what we call the vanishing horizon on these rubrics, which is once we get to a certain level here, we'll then invent stage 5 and stage 6, because stage 4 doesn't mean you're finished. That was very distressing to the administrators to hear that. They thought when they got to stage 4, they were done and they had achieved it. And I hated to tell them that you just take stage 1 off and create stage 5 and move from there. So at this point, we see this as something that we give support for, and it's actively in use through the district, but we see this as, rather than sort of a status, you're either doing data teams or you're not, that there's sort of this continuum of success with it and competence, and that we encourage people to self-assess and with their supervisor where they are and what they're doing and how they can move across. So it's pretty clear how it plays out. So that's what the goal is here. And I'm going to, I think, turn it over to Stratfield now to give you sort of a micro example of how this works, and that this is happening, again, in various stages in every school in the district.
So assuming that technology will work and somebody will get these front lights off, we'll go through the PowerPoint presentation that is at your table, and the front table will move around so that we're not in the way.
I'll let you know when I want you to.
It's coming.
Just like the movies, there's kind of a fade in.
So would my technical advisor please help me figure out how to get...
It's coming.
Great. So just to begin this meeting and this presentation, before I say my official good evenings, I just wanted to let you know this is very similar to my interview process. So this is where we sat here and we were able to have an interview here. So thanks for putting me in the same structure. I would like to say good evening to all of the Board of Ed members and Dr. Title. This evening, my name is Liz McGoey. I'm the proud principal of Stratfield School, and I have with me two very brave and exceptional teachers here from Stratfield School. I have Mrs. Schmidt here, who I'll introduce again, and Mrs. Nyberg, and they're both grade 2 teachers. So again, good evening, and this evening, I'm going to give you an overview of the journey Stratfield School has taken, which will include data teams, instructional rounds, and where we are headed as a school. My hope is that you will come away with how these initiatives fit together and how these initiatives fit together and how they help us, not only as professionals, but help our students as well. When looking at where we started on the developmental rubric that Dr. Title referred to, I believe, and the team really believes, that we started out in the beginning stages, stage 1 and stage 2, which is the beginning and emerging levels. A lot of the responsibility was at the leadership level, as the principal as well as the leadership team. We continue to make progress on this continuum, and I was pleased to hear that there will be a level 5. And as a team of professionals, we're always on our quest toward exemplary, so we're looking for that next level of work. Again, it's a growth mindset, and we're looking to make growth as we go forward. And I think you'll see that we've made a little growth from our work here at Stratfield School. So let's start off with instructional rounds. So what are instructional rounds? Our school-wide data team organizes and facilitates the instructional rounds process. And we have been engaged in this process for several years, so this is not something new. And you might ask yourself, what is instructional rounds? Instructional rounds is a process. It helps educators. We have our teachers work very closely and look at what teachers are doing in the classroom. Gives them an opportunity to get into each other's classrooms in a systematic and focused way. It includes teachers visiting classrooms and gathering evidence, non-judgmental, objective evidence. And after visiting each classroom, we come together, we reflect on what we saw, and then we debrief on the evidence collected. We then move that evidence from instructional rounds, we moved it to our school improvement or our school data team. We noticed that although in our instructional rounds we had always been doing questioning, we hadn't been doing that with the frequency that we would like. We were always asking higher level questions, but were we asking them throughout the content areas, and were we asking them with enough frequency to really get kids to think critically through text? So we found that there were different levels of comprehension in reading, and we needed higher levels of rigorous comprehension in our instruction. So through our information and our evidence gathered in rounds, as well as some reading assessments that we looked at, our reading benchmarks, we were led to our problem of practice. So what is a problem of practice, otherwise known as the POP? A POP is a high-leverage area that has been identified that will make movement for student achievement. It will make a difference in our new strategy or our new problem or our focus will make a movement and be able to increase our student achievement if improved upon. We identified high-level rigorous questioning as that focus area. We use that information that we gathered from our instructional rounds, combined again with that reading assessment, to make our problem of practice high-level rigorous questioning throughout the content areas. So in other words, we all placed our bets on that was what everyone in the building was going to work on, higher level questioning. So we got to work and we started developing our school improvement plan. In order to develop our school improvement plan, we used the reading assessments that I talked about to pre-assess our students and give us a baseline for where our comprehension skills were for our students at Stratfield School. We used this data to inform our school improvement plan and our teacher goals. We had a new teacher evaluation process last year, so all of the grade levels got together and they aligned their goals and objectives, their goals that they would be measured on at the end of the year, toward the SIP, toward our school improvement plan action steps. We identified initial strategies to achieve these goals, and the teachers aligned those in their action steps for their teacher evaluation plan. And then we had to implement it. So we all went to work and we put those strategies into place and we rolled up our sleeves and got started. Just to show you where we are in the process of, you have it in your handouts, on the model of data analysis. Dr. Title, it's on the back of the developmental rubric. Dr. Title included that in the items you have. If you look on the bottom of the cycle there, those last two boxes on the bottom, that's about where we are at this point in forming our school improvement plan. Which leads us to data teams. So we took all of that information, and our data teams are what drives our building. So we have two types of data teams at Stratfield School, and throughout the Fairfield District, they have the same thing. We have our school-wide data team, and there are representatives from each grade level, a special education representative, and the leadership team. They meet 3 to 4 times a year, and their job or their mission is to develop the problem of practice with the data that's collected as well as the instructional rounds data. They monitor the school improvement plan, and then they facilitate the instructional rounds that happen in the building several times a year. We also, so if you think about it, our school-wide data team, that's the umbrella. So then if you look further, we have grade level data teams. Those are almost the people standing underneath the umbrella. I was going to use the rain analogy, but it's the people standing underneath the umbrella. So these are grade level colleagues, K through 5. K meets individually, 1, 2, and so on. And they meet every few weeks. We examine student data to set intermediate goals and discuss instructional strategies to see really whether they're making a difference. And we constantly ask ourselves, did it work? And not only did it work, but how do we know it worked? So we're looking for that evidence. I included then a sample data team agenda with the main items that are discussed in each grade level and school improvement, school data team. So you'll see on the top, there's the grade level, team members present, and the agenda items for discussion. Last year, we put our focus on math data or language arts data. We found that the science and social studies could be incorporated into our language data as well. The meat of our meetings, the core focus, are the following components. So what is being reviewed? We started off with what data are we going to take a look at as a grade level? Is it going to be DRA2 data? Is it going to be reading benchmark data? Is it going to be fluency work? We took that data, then we asked ourselves as a team, what does the data tell us? What are the celebrations we have? What are the strengths that we have as a grade level in a school? And what are some of the challenges that we have? And we listed those out in collaboration with each other. The real important part comes next. What instructional strategies did we use to get those results? What were the highly effective strategies that got us to those celebrations? And also we wanted to look at what were those things that didn't work that well that we needed to tweak. Our next step was to look at our proposed next steps and why. What were the instructional strategies based upon the information that we have now, what are we going to do with it? What instructional strategies are we going to put into place tomorrow? What are we going to do? We also talked about what support we feel we need now, and that's where grade levels came in and said, you know what, I need my language arts specialist to come and do some modeling. I would like the MST to do some modeling. We really worked on growing ourselves professionally towards the instructional strategies. And lastly, we established a SMART goal. So the acronym SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So with every SMART goal, we had to have a time frame attached to it. When we were going to come back and look at, did this work, did it not, and what do we need to do about it? So I can talk all I want to talk, but the true leaders of our building are the teachers. They're our true experts. They're on the front lines doing the work every single day. And I brought 2 exemplary teachers with me this evening. I have grade 2 teachers, Mrs. Amanda Schmidt and Mrs. Kristen Nyberg. And in true collaborative fashion, they're going to back and forth talk a little bit about what data teams and instructional rounds has meant to them.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. When we first met as grade level data teams, we took a look at the data that we had collected for our students. And from there, and based on that data, we were able to narrow down and figure out what the needs of our individual students were. And then from that, we were able to formulate our goal that we use to help drive our instruction.
And then through the practice of instructional rounds, we as teachers were and are still able to continue our learning. The instructional rounds help build our repertoire of strategies that we use to teach and reach students at all levels.
We were also lucky enough through the instructional rounds and through other opportunities to work with Mike Rafferty in our classrooms. This was a powerful experience for us and our students.
And during our work with Mike, he modeled different ways to use higher level questioning with our students, both in small group instruction and whole class instruction.
Once we had our instructional rounds and seen different strategies modeled by Mike Rafferty, we were able to take the new learning and implement this into our own instruction with our students. Through the use of these new higher level questioning practices and other strategies, we were able to see, once we had collected the data on our students, an increase in students' scores. And in addition, we were able to observe in the classroom, and still are observing, the ease at which students are able to answer these types of higher level questioning.
And above all, we as teachers benefited from the time we received to talk with our colleagues and share instructional strategies to benefit our students. Thank you.
So often, very well said, thank you. So often teachers are in isolation. I think the power of these data teams is coming together and being able to share your thoughts and being able to see what other classrooms are doing during instructional rounds as well. So this just didn't happen on its own. We've had a tremendous amount of support, and I'll bring you through a little bit of that support, but there's plenty more support that happened. So our training, our pre-K-12 training of administrators, every month we have district leadership meetings. Dr. Title is the chair of those meetings, and throughout those meetings we really work on calibration of the administrators. We've received training on instructional rounds, the process of it, as well as feedback on how we're doing at our different schools. And we've received at those meetings as well data team training, which includes also fishbowl activities and seeing real live data teams throughout Fairfield that are occurring. It also gives us a chance as administrators to really talk about what's working in our schools and what we need to tweak and steal ideas from each other as well. We also have had, Dr. Title has given instructional rounds training for teacher leaders at our building. Part of this on the developmental rubric is really shared ownership, and we've really worked hard, and Dr. Title has spearheaded making sure that we have teacher leaders in our building so that everyone has a part in this work. So he's done instructional rounds training for several teacher leaders in our building, and that is throughout Fairfield. Last year, we were fortunate enough to work with Michael Rafferty and Walter Wakeman, our curriculum leaders, and we did a year-long school-based embedded PD in math and language arts. And what this consisted of is we worked with each grade level on questioning, and the basic format of those embedded PD sessions were each week teachers would come together and they would have a pre-meeting, then they would see a model lesson by Mike or Walter, and then they would do that same format of debriefing and seeing how this would work into their instructional practice. All of the things that were modeled were with our own children, so teachers could see it real life and in action. Then from there, school-based visits. It's been very helpful. Both Dr. Title and Dr. Kutaya Leonard have been to our schools throughout Fairfield, and they visit our data teams, they visit instructional rounds, and they give us feedback based upon the process and how we can take it to the next level. So we have many results to talk about. As you heard from both of the teachers here, they've really seen an increase in their ability to, for students to react critically to text as well as questions that are being presented. We've also seen a growth in student achievement in targeted areas, especially in the area of questioning, students being able to respond as well as think critically about text. We have also seen a change in instructional practices, and that's been reported by teachers. I've often had teachers come to me, and and this is going to be Walter, if you're out there. Several teachers have said, Walter Wakeman has changed my life. And I would like to think Mike Rafferty has as well. But really, the work that we're doing is so deep and at such a core level that they've improved the instructional practices of all teachers. That's also evidence because I'm in their classes all the time doing walkthroughs, especially with the new teacher evaluation plan. So I'm seeing these instructional practices and the new learning that we've had occurring at a frequent rate. So next steps. We're always looking for what is our next step. We're going to continue with our problem of practice, high-level rigorous questioning. We're going to make some changes in our instructional strategies based upon data team meetings to see what was highly effective and what got us the movement, forward movement that we were looking for. Also, we've started as a district, we have embedded PD with partner schools. It follows the similar format of working with Mike and Walter. But this is partnering up with schools, and there's such a power to schools meeting with other schools. We've noticed as a district that the several schools have the same problem of practice in their school improvement plan. So we are partnered, we're luckily partnered with Holland Hill, Dwight, and Sherman. And we started our first embedded PD, facilitated by both Mike and Walter. And it's the same process of talking about new learning, talking about questioning strategies, feedback strategies, and then getting into the classroom, seeing a model lesson, collecting evidence, and coming back and debriefing on how we're going to make this work, putting action plans into place. We'll continue also to make connections amongst the instructional rounds, data teams, teacher evaluation plan, and see how we can streamline things and make sure that they're not seen as isolated entities. When looking at the developmental continuum as well, I believe as a team we decided that we've moved really from the beginning emerging stages to the functional stage, stage 3. And as Dr. Title had referred to before, what happens as you move along the continuum is really that everyone has a shared ownership. There's more a disaggregation of data to specific instructional strategies and needs of the grade levels that are then translated up to the school-wide data team. So we're looking to get to the exemplary stage, and we're hoping to do that in years to come, but we're always looking for what the next steps are. I want to thank you all for your time and attention, and it's greatly appreciated that we were afforded the opportunity to come and speak to you. Thank you.
Can we ask questions or no?
Yes.
Yes. Get people back in their seats. Let me start with one question, then I'll just go around the board. You started speaking first, but let me ask the first question. How many years have the two of you taught?
This is my 20th year.
20 years.
This is my 11th year.
You made a comment about this is part of your professional development. So you've probably gone to a few workshops and a few trainings over 20 years or 11 years, and so the implementation of instructional rounds and data teams, where do you rank this in terms of the quality and the helpfulness, if you will, of this as a professional development tool?
I'd say it's extremely effective, because when you go to a workshop, you're talking about students who aren't your students, but when you're doing it hands-on with the students that you currently have, it's extremely effective.
I also feel that being able to have someone in your classroom modeling something for you is much more effective than hearing someone teach it to you or watch it. Being able to go back and then talk about it with your colleagues, with administration, and figure out and decide what worked and what worked and where can we go from here is extremely effective and beneficial.
Mrs. Lou McCormick.
Is this kind of a new practice, how you are operating now, or has this been in operation for a while?
This has been in operation for a while. We tweak things as we go through, just like the learning process where we started off. It's been going on for several years before I came here, and each year they kind of take a new step in making sure that there's shared ownership. So last year I feel like we made some really good movement, more toward taking those items from isolation to putting them together in a process. I would say my first year here, too, we were doing all those things as well, and they were doing them before, but we started to see them all coming together, and that started to come last year.
Can I add, Dr. Teitel, I believe, implemented this when he was here, so a while is a relative term.
Right.
How many years have we done this?
Right. We started this process about halfway through my first year here, really got it going in the fall of 11. So we've been at a while. We're about 3 years into it, exactly.
Right, okay.
So continue.
Out of, so just so it can be more tangible, because I think a lot of the words sound lovely, but it really sticks, at least with me, when you give me hard examples. So like when you mentioned changes in instructional strategies. I'm sorry, I'm squinting. I can't see anymore.
Okay.
Can you give me some specific examples where you've actually, from your instructional rounds or from the modeling, where you've actually seen things that could be done better or
Sure.
differently?
We can give you some examples of some of the strategies that we've implemented. I'm going to turn it over to you, and both of you, and if you miss it, I will chime in there too.
You want me to start? One of the instructional strategies that we were working on as a school, and specifically for us for second grade, was reading comprehension and using higher level questioning skills for the students to think deeper, to go into a higher level of questioning from the teacher, so that the student would then be able to think at a higher level rate. So one of the things that we worked on was teaching characters to the students and having them break it down from the, not just the characters' traits, but looking at as a whole.
So one of those things too was that we used several things. We've changed our instruction, and it might sound a little bit global, but one of the things that we've done is, for example, the nursery rhyme Humpty Dumpty, and we've talked to. I know I got some looks there, but we look at. Everyone knows this sort of nursery rhyme, and we talk initially, Mike Rafferty talks initially about, let's think about that nursery rhyme, and let's think about what is the topic or theme behind that. Is it change? Is it family? Is it friendship? So it gets students moving beyond just that, almost like that police report, what's the character, what are they wearing, what are the setting, toward critical themes, which they're asked for as they get older on the SBAC. We've also worked from some of the things that will tie in later with note-taking, as well as forming a main idea, boxes and bullets. And one of those things is putting the main idea in the boxes and bulleting items as they go along. Students have also worked with Mr. Rafferty in the area of, they start off with talking about character analysis. So they might put all of the different characters in the selection on a a framework or a continuum, and then move those according to different questions that are asked about their new understanding of how they synthesized that new information. And, it might sound that like it's not very, it might sound a little bit like it's global, but we're getting from kids those conversations about why characters did things, how the text has changed based upon new information, which is synthesizing. That's really taking them to a new level.
And how do you measure that, in fact, these changes in instructional strategies is actually effective?
We actually, for each data team that we have, I can give you, I don't have all of the data in front of me, but I can give you some good examples. So for example, we use our DRA and we use our benchmark data, which are the district reading assessments. And we found that in the reading assessments, they measure a couple things in reading comprehension. They measure your decoding, they measure your comprehension, fluency, and in the area of comprehension, they measure 3 types of comprehension, and that's within, about, and beyond text. And what we concentrated on this year is really stretching from just within to beyond and about. And in the benchmark assessments, what it does is it breaks down those avenues so we can see whether kids are able to answer those questions. So I just brought a couple things. Grade 5, initially, we had the pre-assessment data where they were at on that assessment in the fall, and they grew by 12% by the end of the year for those students who are meeting and exceeding. In grade 2, they also measured their benchmark data in the beginning of the year, and they grew approximately 9 to 10% by the end of the year, and in those higher levels.
And can I ask you just one more question?
Sure.
Can you also give me like a tangible example within the math of a strategy that maybe something that you identified and then you changed and how it became effective?
I will be honest with you, our math work last year was a tremendous amount of heavy lifting, and we took it very slow with Walter Wakeman, and we made dramatic changes in our math instruction. We worked on the conferring framework, and we brought teachers through what those questions look in our active problem solving section of the math workshop, or the balanced math model. And we really worked side by side to see students how they were approaching a problem, what strategies they were using, and we tracked those questions actually on, as teachers, we tracked all of those questions. We identified how they were being asked, why they were being asked, so that we could see how kids were getting at those higher levels. It's so often, I was taught very differently in math when I grew up, and I never really understood, and Walter still yells at me, I never really understood math. And now I turned to him one day and I said, I totally get it.
And on that, see, I love...
Just so that other board members have a chance, do you have one more question?
Yeah, this is it. And
But I'm enjoying them.
No, I'm enjoying. This is very, I like having the dialogue. So, I love that you are learning, and you find it very enlightening, the whole new process. But for the benefit, because I've heard this sometimes from parents, I would love, just for the benefit of people, that tell me the pros, because we love hearing the pros, but now tell me some of the cons. What are the things that you found that have been problematic with the instructional methods that you would love to fix?
Are we talking about data teams here with instructional methods, or are we talking about teaching practices, or?
I'm talking about
confused.
how your data teams have identified issues.
Okay.
So I want to hear what the issues were that you identified and how now you've brought it to, you see what I'm saying?
Yep. Well, one of the things that we talked about earlier was we found that most of our questions were in the within range, and some of them were in the beyond range. And so we identified that as a problem right away. We're not expanding throughout the wheel on our questions. And that was in math as well as in reading. So we had to change that practice, and we really had to expand our questions throughout the wheel. And that took some time to learn those strategies that were going to get us to that.
Okay. Mr. Confortito, do you have any questions? Not to go in order, but...
I think she pretty much covered.
Okay. You good?
Yeah, I have just a question. When you were talking about the partner schools,
Yes.
and how you were saying that you had the partners with the schools that had the same POPs, does that change from year to year depending on, if I'm assuming you don't always have the same issues each time, so does it move around each year? Or?
That's a great question.
No.
So previous to this POP, I like how you use that. Previous to this POP, we had student-to-student discourse, which was also comprehension, but in an oral fashion. So it's, the school improvement plan is for 2 years, and then we tweak as we go along to add action steps, but then we'll look for a new problem of practice after 2 years. So this particular school improvement plan was started last year, and will technically end at the end of this year. However, if we still need to work on questioning, we'll continue to work on questioning, and we'll just take the next steps. So as far as the embedded PD goes, those schools have a similar problem practice as us right now, and that could probably change over the years. Thank you.
Mr. Llewellyn.
First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for coming out this evening and sharing this with us, because this is actually very insightful. In terms of embedded PD, help me, is that where you model in front of students or model in front of each other? Can you give me a
That's a great
clear
question,
definition?
too. That's a great question. PD has changed many ways over the years. I used to go to professional development, and it really was kind of a speaker in front of the room who was imparting knowledge on the rest of us that we're asked to then go back and take into our buildings. And it doesn't take into effect, okay, well, the range of the kids in my class, our own students and things like that. So the embedded PD is right in our own schools. And last year, the embedded PD was with our kids in our own school. It looked at, for example, we went into Miss Nyberg's class, we went into Miss Schmidt's. She was able to see where the problems were. And so, for example, like, we would say to Mike and Walter, so I have little Johnny here, and I'm really struggling with bringing Johnny forward to the next level. So let's work with Johnny. So the modeling not only was with the kids right there, where they would have the dialogue back and forth as well, like, here's how I'm solving this problem, but also we did a combination too, where Mike and Walter taught us how to do the strategy, not only with the kids, but separately in case we had questions. So it was a little bit of both.
So did Mike and Walter get up in front of the entire class and teach for a
Yes.
period?
Yes.
Very good. Okay.
And that was on a weekly basis.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. And then, when you do it across schools, is that you've got teachers teaching in other schools, or are they more watching and giving feedback?
Again, great question. That's also new this year. We had our first session last week. It might have been the week before. But Mike and Walter are at this point facilitating, and so a group of us, we're in 2 teams, even though so they split our teams. We have representation of all schools. And we go and watch Mike and Walter. We watch a math lesson, and we watch a literacy lesson. So we're able to see both in that day that we spend there. There's a little bit of new learning prior to going into those classrooms. And then we see that in action with the students at that school. So last week, we were at Sherman School. That's going to rotate as well. We're going to go to all the schools so that every one of us have the opportunity for them to work with our kids. After that modeling, there's a little bit more of an information sharing, and then we get right down to action steps and how we're going to make this work in our buildings.
Great, thank you. And then, I guess we're transitioning to iReady this year. I've heard from a lot of parents that they're starting to go through the testing, I guess, now, and it's going to happen 3 times over the course of the year. Is that something that's going to feed directly into your data teams? And then will that be math and ELA, or is that just math? And
I believe we're just doing the math portion, but we've began our iReady testing, and that is going to be a wonderful data point for us as a school, as well as all the schools are probably going to use that. So that, actually, they have, you can manipulate the data on different cohorts and things like that, so we can kind of extract that in order to meet our needs of getting to all groups of students. So I expect that to be a very powerful tool. We used Blue Ribbon and Ames Web in the past, but this will kind of cover us K through 5. So we're excited about that.
It replaces Blue Ribbon?
Yes.
It does. And it's all online, so the kids
It's all online, so our kids started logging in the other day, and it's going great, and we're excited. We did our teacher training the other day and showed them how to log in with their students, and, we're working out the glitches as we go, but it's going to be a powerful tool for data.
Very good.
And it'll disaggregate by different strands and things like that we need to work on.
You answered my question. Thank you guys again for coming out. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Patton.
Hi. Reiterate, again, thanks for coming out. This is very, very insightful. And Mr. Llewellyn, his second question covered mostly what I wanted to know in terms of how, if one school has a POP and then the teachers transition, and how does it work going from, from your school to observe in another school, and how do you transition that data back to your school? So I guess maybe this is a question through the chair to Dr. Title. Do we, as a district, if several schools, let's say, have the same POP that they've come up with, maybe they have, maybe they haven't, do those schools then get grouped together in terms of how the data feeds and the problems are solved?
Well, that's how they've been grouped for the PD, and then that makes it easy for them to, when they do instructional rounds, also can occur between buildings. The rounds that Liz described were internal to just Stratfield School, but there's another part of instructional rounds where teachers visit different schools and debrief with those teachers, and so a number of the schools are going to probably pair up, and so that if your problem of practice is the same, probably within that 4, they can make 2 pairs, and then when they do their, what we call external rounds, then they can learn about their own problem of practice. They can also see how the problem of practice is being addressed in another school. So if Sherman is implementing some strategies about instructional rounds, when it occurs and say Stratfield visits there and goes into classrooms with teachers from Sherman and teachers from Stratfield, they're all working on the same problem of practice, both are going to learn from that. Right? The Sherman teachers being visited will get feedback from their colleagues on what they see, and these folks will see how another school is attempting it, and often light bulbs go off like, wow, I didn't realize that that was a way we might be able to, address the issues. So they sort of naturally pair up that way. So I see this, and this is the first year we've done this at the elementary level. At the middle school level, they've also done instructional rounds, but there's only 3 of them, so they just do it among all 3. And in fact, I think last year, the middle schools had a very similar problem of practice among all 3 schools. And so the instructional rounds would then be very, very focused on that. So we're shooting for that collaboration, and this is really the first year where the PD has been tailored to the problem of practice that the schools have identified. So that ties it back to the school improvement plan, instructional rounds, data. That was one of the issues the board we had talked about, is trying to connect all these things. So you've got the teacher in the classroom setting her individual goals for part of teacher evaluation, connected to the grade level, connected to the school improvement plan, and a lot of support and work from staff to actually make it happen. So, again, this is developmental for the whole district as well. Not everybody is in the same spot on this.
Okay,
It
great.
was a longer, I gave you an answer to a question you didn't ask in part, but that's, hadn't had the microphone for a while, I was feeling antsy.
So,
Liz done such a good job explaining it all, she didn't leave anything for me, and so, anyway.
You're welcome to have the microphone back.
No, that's fine, I get it way too much.
So we
You
do
should
have
come
it-
more often.
We do have another presentation, so we want to try and stay on schedule. And as you know, as the board knows, we have said that this will be a topic that we're talking about in bits and pieces throughout the year, because it's a fairly sizable topic of conversation and can't all get covered in one night. Last question, and then we'll move on.
Last question, I may segue into the next presentation. Through the chair to either Dr. Title or Dr. Boyce. We've heard how this helps improvement and so forth. I'm curious, the data that we get from the RISAP survey, is that used in the data teams at the middle school and the high schools?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I've observed data teams at those levels doing exactly that. They use, well, the last time I saw it, they used the school climate survey data, because every school is required as part of their school improvement plan to have a strand on school climate. And that's, a lot of school climate is related to what we're going to hear in the RISAP work. So this can feed directly into school improvement plans, because school climate can have a lot of impact on the issues that are as part of the RISAP. So we only focus this on the academic side. It's sort of the most easily measured. We try not to deluge you with data, but there is a whole other side to this, and I've seen school data teams using school climate survey information and developing strategies in their school improvement plans to improve school climate. And I think the RISAP data would be another piece of information that could be part of it as well. But this is all coming out, and the last RISAP data was 3 years ago, I think. So there's certainly potential there, John. Yeah, thank you.
So I'll hold this one to the last question, and then we'll move on. Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I guess this is for Dr. Teitel. Out of curiosity, when you put together the data teams, have we ever considered maybe including some parents to participate in, reading the data and giving thoughts or feedback?
Right now, as this is ramping up, we have not done that. I think one of the most important factors in a successful data team is that what I call psychological safety is the sort of fancy term, which is we want these folks to feel free to share without repercussions, without anybody feeling like I don't want to speak truthfully about where I'm not able to be successful as students. And it's hard enough to do that in front of your colleagues. It's really hard to do it in front of the principal. And I think maybe at the point where they get to that comfort level that, parents being there, while they might be there for all the right reasons, I think it could be an issue in terms of getting teachers to, in front of parents, say what's happened. However, I think that it's very helpful for principals and teachers at parent meetings and PTAs to stand up generically and say pretty much what Liz said, which is we've identified some gaps in our practice. We're not saying we've got this perfect, and here are the areas that we're trying to improve as a school, and here's what's happened with that. So I think there's definitely, we want to make sure the parents understand it. The school improvement plans are on the website, but at this point, we've not included parents. It doesn't mean down the road we couldn't, but I think that'll be in stage 5.
And let me just suggest that I would assume would be anonymous, so it would just be for data and not really for, presentation.
Well, the whole thing is the conversation around the data, what caused it, really being able to have an honest conversation about, it's really hard for someone, to sit there and say, this data is showing we're not doing so well with this, and here's why I think I haven't been able to do it. That's a big step, but that's an important step. And I think we're still working on that with staff members. This is new. Teachers are used to working in isolation, close the door, do your thing, people come in periodically to check, and if we're ever going to make large-scale improvements in student achievement in the district, this has to be much more of a team sport than an individual sport. And the more the teachers and the principals see it as a team sport as opposed to an individual sport, I think that's where we'll really get the benefit of it. So I'm not ruling it out. I think that there's probably a way to incorporate it, but right now I think we're still building.
So,
Thank you.
You know that when students get called to the principal's office, they get a little nervous from time to time. And I suspect that the three of you, perhaps the Board of Education was your principal's office. Visit.
I would agree.
But your colleagues should be very proud of you. You made a very good presentation, responded to the questions very well, and so I join Mr. Llewellyn and the whole board in thanking you for bringing us a little bit further along in understanding instructional rounds and data teams. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So the RISAP folks have to work at this table to change presentations. So while we do that, I wonder if I might ask, yes, please join us at there's a chair over there for you.
No. This is for Anna.
So all of you, I'm sure, know that Dr. Anna Kataya-Leonard has prepared herself through training and through administrative certificates and through achieving a doctorate and through just gaining experience at the Fairfield Public Schools that have prepared her to be the new superintendent of District 9. 14. 14. Sorry.
You're scaring somebody.
And so this is the last opportunity that she'll be at a board meeting at this table because she'll be at a board meeting at other tables. and we didn't want the opportunity to go by without us giving her a sincere thank you and send-off and well wishes for the work that you've done here on behalf of students, and I'm sure the work that you'll be doing in District 14 for students as well. I wanted to give board members an opportunity to make a couple of comments. I know that one of your this isn't exactly a 360-degree evaluation with the superintendent weighing in, your peers weighing in, and your people who you supervise weighing in, but it's kind of like that. So if there are any board members that
Want to know who knew about this.
So if there are any board members that want to make a comment, please feel free. Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Dr. Kataya Leonard very much. She has always been very passionate about her job, about helping, bringing people together and working together in a collaborative way. And anytime I've had a question, even before I was on the board as a parent, she was very responsive, which is something that parents really appreciate. And as a board member, I also appreciate her help and assistance and answers when I've had questions. So thank you very much.
Other board members? Mr. Convertito?
Yeah, I think I actually met Kataya Leonard in her freshman year here.
Yes, we did. I remember.
And since that time, she has, gained my respect and admiration, and I just want to thank you for your dedication and congratulate you and wish you well.
Thank you.
Other board members? Mr. Patton?
I think Mr. Convertito hit the nail on the head with the word respect. I think you're respected by boards over the years. I think you're respected by your peers. I've heard nothing but good respect from parents that I've talked to over the years before I was a board member. And again, I've only been on the board a short time, but your open door policy has always been inviting, and we're going to miss that. And your replacement is going to have some big shoes to fill.
Mrs. Lou McCormick.
We just wanted to wish you best of luck. I hope that everything turns out fabulous, and I'm sure you'll do a great job there.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Llewellyn, and
I was just wanting to know if you had a chance to speak to Dr. Title before you accepted. I wanted to see what advice he might have had for you.
are you suggesting that falls into the be careful what you wish for?
No comment. Good luck. Best of luck.
We've had a lot of conversations over the years about the pros and cons of this job.
So, Mr. Llewellyn, and then we'll move to one of your colleagues. Mr. Llewellyn.
And I just want to wish you the best of luck in your endeavors.
Thank you.
So we have a school principal here who would like to share some thoughts. Her fellow principals unanimously selected her to speak on behalf of everybody.
I think she volunteered.
You need to use a mic.
So, or you can sit where Ms. Maxon Cannelli normally sits, or Mr. Fatterbean. Or don't.
You want to sit here?
If you want, take Dr. Title's seat.
You can have this for the rest
No,
of the meeting.
thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. My name is Brenda Anziano, and I'm the principal of Riverfield Elementary School, and I'm one of the longest-serving principals at the elementary level, and that's why I'm speaking on behalf of the entire team tonight. I'm here to share some thoughts about Anna on behalf of all of us. Virginia Allen states that true leadership is the art of changing a group of people from what it is into what it ought to be. It is not something that is done to people. It is something that is done with people. By that definition, every person in an organization can and must lead. This is a perfect quote to describe Anna's work with our elementary leadership team. Prior to the creation of the Director of Elementary Education, the elementary schools in Fairfield were primarily operating as individual units, focusing on each building's unique needs. We felt kind of like captains of our own ship, adrift at seas without much direction. We were absolutely delighted when the position of Director of Elementary Education was created, and very fortunate that Anna found her way to Fairfield to fill this important need in our schools. All 11 elementary principals would agree that our lives changed for the better from the first day we met Anna. While it is impossible for us to share all of our accomplishments she and we have made since her arrival, there are certainly some highlights that I can share tonight. We created consistency between 11 schools, in a way that has helped support our individual and our group initiatives. We have aligned the curriculum across all 11 schools and are utilizing standard district assessments to monitor student achievement. We created a revised progress report, implemented data teams at each school that led to conversations that effectively inform instruction to improve student achievement. We expanded our preschool program and established a full-day kindergarten program. We advocated and received additional staffing support in buildings in the area of literacy, math and science, and established a new model of service delivery in the areas of gifted and special education. We increased efficiency of all leadership, department, and school meetings. In other words, we don't meet at the elementary level without an agenda. Most agendas are focused on student outcomes, teacher expectations, leadership training, and our curricular conversations. However, Anna always finds time to throw in her favorite family game, chair volleyball, to help further develop our team's collaborative skills. Beyond those and many other accomplishments that will live in Fairfield long after Anna says her last goodbye, will be the memories we have of Anna as she works so closely with all of us to do such important work. She is a leader with a clear vision and a hands-on style. She spent a great deal of time in all of our buildings, made it her business to know all of our staff members, even by name, and led by example. Anna walked the walk with us all the time. She celebrated with us when students in schools won awards. She visited classrooms regularly, offering support and guidance, is and was the first one to come to buildings if we had a serious issue, and Anna has always been available to us at any time of the day or night. She's a great problem solver, a keen listener, and a mentor to all of us. She has pushed us all to set high standards for ourselves as leaders, as well as expecting teachers to set high student achievement goals and strive for excellence. We are thrilled for Anna that she has achieved her career goal of becoming a superintendent, but we are saddened at the loss of her from our team. Our team has gone from good to great because of Dr. Kataya Leonard's leadership. She has always preached to us that you know you are an effective leader when your organization continues to grow past your tenure. Anna has taught us all how to be more effective leaders, and her legacy will be the continuation of our work. We thank you, Anna, and we want you to know that we are going to miss you terribly, and Regent School District 14 is blessed to have you joining them as their leader.
So, we ought to give Dr. Anna Kataya Leonard a few moments to respond. You know that you've conducted a good send-off when, like Barbara Walters' interview, you caused the person to maybe shed a few tears of joy. And clearly, Anna has done that. But please, the floor is yours if you wish to make any parting comments.
I would, thank you. This was a no-cry week, but I guess I've blown that. I feel incredibly blessed to be in this room, to be part of this community, this school system. I've called this place my professional home for almost 7 years. And I guess when I chased after the dream of being a superintendent, which Dr. Teitel tried to talk me out of for many years, one thing that just didn't click was that I'd have to leave this place to do that. And as excited as I am about going to Region 14, I really can't wait to be there. It is exceptionally difficult to leave this place. Fairfield just kind of gets under your skin. And yes, I feel very well prepared from all of the experiences here. I think the most important piece that I'll be taking with me out of 24 years of being in education are the memories of the people here. There are some pretty exceptional individuals here, groups of parents that I look out among the crowd now and can recollect our coming together and collaborating and advocating for our kids. You really made me feel like they were my kids as much as they were yours. the teachers that I see in the audience, that I get to see as I walk through schools, where we're not just talking about instructional practice and high achievement expectations for kids, but we're also talking about how's your mother doing, how are things going at home. I've been able to develop some personal relationships with people that I will take with me forever. I'm sorry. The most difficult group to leave would be my colleagues at the central office and the elementary leadership team. It's probably the most significant team, most effective team that I've ever worked with in 24 years. I feel like we've been able to really make a difference for Fairfield kids through all of our battles and wars. And I have felt so supported. I've never felt alone going out on a limb, fighting for our kids and for what we believed in. And I will never regret any fight we took on, because we knew we were doing the right thing. So I want to thank the full Fairfield community, parents, and professionals for trusting me with your children and allowing me to be part of such a great home for almost 7 years. And I will certainly miss this place. Thank you.
Another round of applause. She served with grace, and she exits with grace. Excuse me? So, we are now ready for RIASAP. Although one person's name is on the agenda, we have two speakers representing RIASAP. It's long-serving and esteemed Executive Director, Dr. Robert Francis, and he's brought a colleague with him. So I'll turn the presentation over to him, and again, we'll move from here and then rejoin at the end.
A person much more visible in Fairfield over the last year is Danique Weideman-Lewis, who is joining me and will be making the presentation with me. Before getting into it, I mean, Fairfield is the first presentation we're doing this year in the 5 communities that we're working in. And we got all this data at the end of the summer, and right up until about 5 minutes before this board meeting, we were still tweaking data. And I discovered one thing as I was going over the presentation, and we had 2 pages in there where we had left the 2012 data in there rather than the 2014. All the board members have gotten the corrected pages, and for the audience, we've got about 35 copies of slides 23 and 24, which will be a replacement for the pages that are in your presentation. Okay. So I guess to start, a little bit of history. RIASAP was started by the United Way of Eastern Fairfield County way back in 1985, and we were created out of a substance abuse survey done by the United Way at that time. Actually, it was a needs survey, and the biggest need that came up in 1985 was substance abuse among adolescents. RIASAP started in that process, and we have continued the custom of surveying young people every 3 years since 1985. We are surveying the 5 communities of Greater Bridgeport, Fairfield, Stratford, Trumbull, and Monroe. And about 4 surveys ago, 12 years ago, we switched from the pure substance abuse survey to a survey conducted by the Search Institute out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And that Search Institute survey was much more in keeping with the custom that we had at RIASAP. If you heard the speaker early on at the very beginning, The focus is really all about assets. And the Search Institute survey looks at 40 developmental assets of young people that the more assets they have, the more successful they will be. And we had a philosophy at RISAP, which we have continued to this day and it really comes out of something a colleague said to me a long time ago, that no deficit ever solved a problem. No need ever solved a problem. The only thing that solves problems are assets, strengths, talents. If we don't know what they are, what are we going to build on? So if you're going to do something about substance abuse, if you're going to do something about criminal behavior, if you're going to do something about depression and mental health issues and other issues that young people have, you've got to identify their strengths, and you have to work from their strengths in order to make an effort on that problem. So the question often asked of us is the glass half full or the glass half empty? And the answer to that is yes. It's both, okay? We all have, just as you as board members and you as members of the Fairfield community, have problems. You have needs. You've got certain deficits that you're working on. You've got certain issues in your family. Every single one of you also has a big bundle of assets, skills, and talents to work on that. The focus that we want to leave you with as we're talking today, and we'll be talking to you, we've been talking to you forever about working with Fairfield Cares, working with the First Selectman's Office, working with the Board of Education, is that focus on your strengths. You've got an awful lot of them here in Fairfield. You've got a lot of good things going for you. You've got some weaknesses in those strengths, but the data will tell you where to, focus your energy on some of those things depending on the kind of changes you want to make. So that's my lead-in to the survey itself. We've done a survey of 18% of the Fairfield 7th through 12th grade students in Fairfield, and which comes out to about 1,000 students. We've done a little over 3,000 students in the greater Bridgeport area, and which was around 18%. I think it's actually a little bit higher in Fairfield in terms of what we've done. And of that, that they're pretty evenly divided between the 6 grades as you're looking at them. So here's the data as it sits up there. There is a ton of data in this report. I'm going to hand this document to Dr. Teitel at the end. This is the Fairfield report, everything that's in it, So there's like a 150 question survey that's there. We also did a supplemental survey this year because the Search Institute didn't cover some things that we had a big interest in and that our communities had a big interest in. We asked questions about social media, the use of social media and its impact on young people in there. In the drug area, we didn't talk very much in the Search Institute survey about prescription drugs. Tobacco use has been one of the biggest success stories, in this country in terms of not just young people, but adults as well. But as tobacco use has gone down, we now have something called e-cigarettes. So we asked some questions about that, to find out what the usage was there. And I think the data, as Danique will tell you a little bit later, surprised us a little bit in terms of how high the use is. So without further ado, let's get into the assets. And as I said before, the Search Institute has a paradigm of 40 developmental assets, and they're divided into external assets. And do you have the next one, Danique? Okay. External assets are those positive experiences and supports a young person receives from formal and informal connections to the community. One of the things to think about the external supports is that these are basically, if you want to do something about these, you're basically not changing youth behavior. Adult behavior needs to change, because the supports that young people get as external assets are mostly coming from adults and the kind of supports you set up in the community. So they're divided into 4 different areas. That's support, empowerment, boundaries and expectations, and constructive use of time. And under support, we look at family support, we look at school support, we look at other adult relationships, and we look at school climate and those issues. Family support is incredibly high here in Fairfield. That doesn't come as a surprise to any of you. The second one up there, family communication, is actually much lower. And the reason for that is it's like what young people will talk to their parents about. There are questions there, as young people, and especially this particular population in adolescence and going through puberty is how willing are they at certain grade levels to talk to their parents about their budding sexuality, about their own or their peers' experimentation with different types of behaviors and those things. So that actually brings that down a little bit lower. Other adult relationships are very important to young people, and we've noticed in our survey work that they become much more important as young people get older. Those of you that have adolescents, and those of you that have seventh graders, the seventh graders are still pretty connected to their families and things like that. As they get up in the grade level, their peer group becomes more important, and other adults play an influence, in their life. And so you also have caring neighborhoods, what kind of support they get from their neighbors. Is the school a caring, encouraging environment? And parent involvement in schooling. And parent involvement in schooling is not just going to Board of Ed meetings and things like that. It's also helping your children with their homework, asking them about how their school days have gone, and really engaging them in conversation and those things. So, and remember that all of the answers to all of these questions is the child's perspective, which may differ quite a bit from the parent's perspective, on the same issues. So that's the support category. When we talk about empowerment, we're talking about young people feeling a growing sense of power as they're developmentally aging. So young people do not feel very valued, by adults. This came as a surprise to us when we first saw a figure around 27%. When we took a look at that, but it should come as no surprise. The Search Institute also surveyed adults in this country about what they thought of teenagers. 75% of them do not trust teenagers and think they're up to things that are negative. Guess what? Your young people know that, and they know what's coming back at them. Young people used as resources. As your young people are aging, they can take on more and more responsibility. These figures tend to be low in our communities because we don't provide enough responsible opportunities for our young people to get really engaged in, serious decision-making. Like there's one in here, do young people feel like they've got any say in what goes on at school? That's a very low percentage of young people that feel they've got something to say about what goes on in their educational environment. We also ask them about their families. That's a little bit higher. Actually significantly higher when we ask them, and then we ask them about different things that they're involved with. And so if they're involved at RISAP in one of our leadership groups or things like that, we're trusting their feedback all the time to change what we do. But it's important that we give our young people opportunities, to be utilized as resources, and developmentally they can handle more and more as they progress from 12 years old to 18 years old and are getting ready for college. Service to others. We've really had a big focus on service in this country. 54% of your young people are serving in the community at least 1 hour or more per week. And that service is a bit more formal, but an awful lot of them are helping out with babysitting, aging grandparents, younger children in their family, which are all service things. And safety. How safe do young people feel at home, school, and in the neighborhood? 61% of young people said they're feeling safe in all those environments. The other thing you need to recognize by all of the assets up there are about 4 questions that comprise each asset. And so when you go through the bigger survey, you'll see a section there. So family support, for example, will have about 4 questions in here, and then you can go to the questions and get the real breakdown of data, and you can get it by grade level, when you're looking at that. Okay, next one. Boundaries and expectations. Young people protest like crazy that they don't want boundaries set, but they actually do. They really want clear rules and consequences, and they really want to be monitored. One of the worst things we can do for young people is not make those rules clear. that if you behave this way, this will occur, and we need to be consistent across particular groups of people. Your best students academically act out occasionally. Should their punishment be different than the young person who may not be doing so well in school? It's our tendency to sort of blame the young people who are not doing as well, but, the young people also pick up on those inconsistencies, so it's important. So family boundaries, school boundaries, neighborhood boundaries. A lot of us in my age group, of course, grew up in neighborhoods where we had 30 parents. Everybody who lived on the street was our parent, and we're providing boundaries for me. I think I got it, when I really did something bad, I think I got 3 spankings almost before I reached home. That doesn't happen anymore. And so the neighbors are playing much less of a role, but, my grandchildren and my son and daughter-in-law all live in Fairfield, and they would say their neighborhood is a neighborhood that's a really great place to live where everybody's watching out for everybody. And so I know those communities exist here. Adult role models are absolutely critical. What we do as adults cannot be double standards to our children, in terms of what's there. An adult that smokes marijuana and doesn't want their children to do it is not sending a very good message, to those young people. If we have adults that are, openly cheating on taxes and things like that, that gets carried on to our young people. So it's very important that we model positive behavior for our young people. Positive peer influence, that's very high here. We always look at peer relations as being a bit negative at times. The truth is they play a much more positive role. And your young people in Fairfield are saying, 71% of them saying, that their friends are modeling positive behavior. So that's where they're getting it. High expectations, both parents and teachers, encouraging their students to do well in school. As you dig into the questions here, they really believe that about 50% of their teachers do that, and about 50% do it to some degree, but maybe not to a higher amount. Might be something you might want to look at later on. And then how young people use their time. Creative activities, about 1 in 5 young people spends 3 hours a week in music, theater, arts. That's a low figure, but it's not low nationwide. That's about right in terms of young people doing creative things. If you go to the next one, youth programs, where young people spend time in sports, clubs, organizations, school, and community, that's at 76%. And so you put the two of those together, and you got most of your young people here in Fairfield are involved in something. I know taking my grandkids around to lacrosse, baseball, basketball, soccer, and theater and things like that, they're pretty typical of what's going on. Religious community. And by the way, that 76% figure is the highest in our region. I mean, Fairfield does a lot for its kids. There's a lot going on here in comparison to some of the other communities. Religious community, one of the things we're discovering here, and you might be seeing this, as you read newspapers and whatever media you read, is that we're becoming a bit more secular, as a country, and religion is not playing as strong a role. And the data here is sort of interesting. You might see in 7th grade, for example, over 70% of young people have religion as playing an influence in your life. When you get to the senior in high school, it drops to about 25%. So, and we know that it's a strong asset for young people to have that prevents certain types of risky behavior. And then time at home, how much are young people hanging out with friends? How much are they at home? It's a pretty positive thing. And then we have internal assets. The internal assets are things that a community and family nurture within youth so that they can contribute to their own development. So adults play a role with all of these things, but it's really the drive inside young people themselves that drives these. So achievement motivation, for example, is very, very high here in Fairfield. Young people want to achieve, and they want to do well in school. They're engaged with their schools. 67% of them report doing at least an hour of homework every school day. That increases by grade level. You'll see later on there's a big difference here between boys and girls. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Bonding to school, this is all about sort of school spirit and how they feel about their school, also a high figure. Reading for pleasure, if my daughter, who is now 34 years old, is any indication, She stopped reading books somewhere around 7th grade and started reading them again when she was about 25. That there was so much other work to do that there's not a lot of time for reading for pleasure. Positive values, young people do very well in all these. Caring for others, equality and social justice, integrity, honesty, responsibility. For all of those things that adults attribute to young people, they actually have incredibly high values about these things. And I suspect they tell you about them as parents every time they get a chance. You know, my kids certainly didn't. And restraint is their ability to not be sexually active, not use alcohol and drugs, their ability to say no to those things. And those are very difficult things for young people to do because they're getting a lot of pressure on those items. Okay. So, next one.
Yeah, I did it.
Where is it?
Right here.
No.
That's it.
Okay. So there are certain assumptions about assets, okay? You don't need all of those assets to thrive, and combinations of them will affect particular types of risky behavior. Having more assets is better than having a few. As young people get more assets, they have fewer risky behaviors. That's the reason the Search Institute did this in the first place, is that as we increased assets, we reduced the negative behaviors that we're talking about. And so everything we can do to expose young people to positive experiences, you know, is all well worth its while. So now we're going to get into some of the risky behaviors that young people are into, and you know, and so you'll get some of the data, and a lot of this is also very positive compared to where we were before. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration in Washington determined through a lot of research a number of years ago that there were 4 important things in reducing substance abuse. One was taking a look at past 30-day use of alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. The second one was, at what age did young people start this? The later they start, the less likely they're going to have a problem with these substances later on. The third thing was the peer themselves, the young person's view themselves, their perception of risk. You know, so how did they perceive the risk of using these drugs? And the fourth one was their perception of what their parents' perception of risk was. And so Danique is now going to lead you through some of this data. Okay?
Okay. So the 4 core measures have changed somewhat as of this past survey. We're still primarily focused on the past 30-day use. There is still the parent perception that's asked on the survey, but they have changed it slightly. So some of the slides that you'll see, if there is trend data that I thought was interesting, I included it. For some things, since some of these measures have changed, the information is not available, and this is the first time that we're actually seeing it. But as far as 30-day use goes, alcohol is at 25, just about 25%. Tobacco use, 30-day use is about 5% of your young people. Marijuana use, just a little bit less than 16. Prescription drugs at 4.2. Prescription drugs is something that, as far as the core measures are concerned, are an increasing thing that the federal government wants to keep their eye on. As far as us as a state goes, we haven't collected prescription drug data, so this is an opportunity for us to start gathering that data to inform the prevention work that that will be moving forward. I'll talk a little bit more about what all of this means in the grand scheme of things as well. So the nice opportunity that we have in really working with the local prevention council that is comprised of both community partners as well as our schools is to be able to look at different information. This parent survey was administered this past fall or spring of 2014 through Fairfield Community Cares Coalition, and the parent survey was really asking parents to see where they thought their young person scored. This is a very rare opportunity. We hear a lot in the search survey about youth perceived parent perception, but we have a very rare opportunity to actually poll parents themselves. And probably it stays pretty much in line with what we're seeing with the 30-day use. Alcohol is still a widely accepted and used drug. Very small with prescription drugs and cigarette use, and slightly higher when we're talking about marijuana. Now, this is the interesting part. Now, the 30-day use for alcohol at this point right now is 25%, but I always like to know what, anecdotally, what are the things that have been happening in your community? So I gathered this information and said, okay, well, what were the numbers past? And you can see, just based on the direction of the slide, your numbers have been going down. So even though 25% seems to be a daunting percentage, it actually is the lowest percentage that you guys have ever had. And I've thought about it, and it's like, well, what are the things that have been happening really between that 2005-2008 period, and what's happened since then that has encouraged this decline? So when we're talking about the things that are happening in our schools and in the community, we're talking about the 9th grade forum, which was started in 2010. So that dash in between the 2008-2012 helped to support some of the efforts that were already being made by both the community and the schools. The Fairfield Cares Community Coalition, which was previously just focused on alcohol and other drug use, had merged with Positive Directions with the Best Practice Grant also around 2010. So that was also able to provide those fabulous social norms campaign posters that were at both of the high schools, as well as to bring in additional resources to both of the high schools. So we're seeing that this is a great success, that it's on the continued decline, and with continued efforts, we'll see it move even farther down. Just as Bob emphasized before, that when we're talking about substance use and their asset levels, the more assets, the better. So with all of these, there is a steady decline with use depending on the amount of assets young people have or are reporting. Now, this is one of the core measures that has been updated. It's really asking young people about their perception of risk. It goes pretty much aligned with what we're seeing as far as the 30-day use. There is an edit to your PowerPoint slide. For the marijuana, that is the red bar. Instead of it being 92.9, your perception of risk is 61.3. So that has been a steady decline. As of 2012, I'll read the 2014 numbers for those in the audience. Your alcohol rate, as far as perception of risk, is at about 83%. Tobacco, young people feel like 93% of young people feel like smoking cigarettes is very harmful. Marijuana, with this edit, it is 61.3. So it's a lot lower. And the prescription drug is just about at 92. So in comparison to where you were in 2012, alcohol risk was only at 69%. So that has been an increase of about 20%, or give or take. Tobacco risk has stayed about the same at about 95%. Marijuana has been on the decline. As of 2012, young people thought that marijuana was harmful at a rate of 77%. So from 77% to 61.3, we're seeing that there's a lot of more work to be done when we're talking about marijuana. But as I'm sure a lot of us know in the room, when we're talking about marijuana and young people, that sometimes, and most of the time, young people neither have the correct information and are misguided in their thinking based on current laws. So in Connecticut, we've seen the decriminalization of marijuana. We're seeing the outright medical marijuana being used within our state. And then, of course, all of the things that young people see on a regular basis, whether it be through social media, popular movies that have marijuana use as kind of the normal thing, and as well as legalization of marijuana for recreational use in other states. So all of this really leads to the mass confusion of how we're talking and communicating the message of marijuana out to our young people. Okay, perception of risk. So of those who say that, well, let me backtrack a little bit. This is the first opportunity that we're seeing a couple of data points from our supplemental survey that was included. We really wanted to ask young people, since marijuana is an emerging trend, kind of what their value was on their perception. So when responding to the question of it is okay to smoke marijuana, about 10% agree that it is strongly agree that it is not okay. Oh no, that it is okay. Ooh, that's bad. 17.13, yeah, okay, say that they somewhat agree. Somewhat disagree with the statement is at about 18%, and strongly disagree that it is. So lots more young people are saying that it is not acceptable for marijuana use at about 55%. There is cause for concern as we move forward with changing laws and emerging trends to see if that will fluctuate. So we also have information from the parents survey where we're talking about alcohol. As far as parents go, and what we've seen within the strides in Fairfield about underage alcohol use, that many parents, at least moderately or greatly, feel that it is harmful for young people to be drinking any alcohol at any point. So just another way for us to emphasize the work that has been done on the front of underage alcohol use. When we ask these same parents about marijuana use, they greatly agree that there is a large risk of harm for a young person. Now, obviously, as parents, as caring adults, we know that marijuana use does affect academic achievement. We want our young people to succeed. Moving forward as far as action steps go, it is how to communicate that message to a young person. Okay, risk. Back to the parent survey. This is the first time that this question was asked in 2014, so we don't have the trend data, but how much harm is there for prescription drug use without? Predominantly, young people are stating that it is very harmful. So that's great. It goes along with our 30-day measure, which was substantially low for 30-day use with young people. We do have supports within the Fairfield community. This past spring, the prescription drop box was installed at the police department through our community partnership. So more education will be going out to parents and to young people about avoiding prescription drug use, and as well as proper disposal of what is in their house. Okay, another graph just really emphasizing the asset levels, that when young people do have these assets, the higher the better. So when young people are presenting to have a large number of assets, which a lot of your young people do, a lot of them do fall within that red area, that the more assets that young people have, the better off they are when it comes to substance use. Okay, this is the third core measure when really asking young people about how their parents feel about disapproval. They're all substantially high. So they know as parents that parents are communicating the message. Now, whether or not that translates into their use, it's something else. But we know that from the data that this clearly demonstrates that parents are really having these tough conversations, and hopefully through the use of the ninth grade forums and all of the extra supports on the high school level, the parents are feeling more empowered to have those hard and tough conversations. Just extra emphasis on these assets. Okay, and this is our fourth core measure, which is something that has been included and updated as of about 2011. We're talking about how young people think their peers think about substance use. Same trend is going on. As far as alcohol use, it's 76.7%. Tobacco is one of the highest at 84%. Marijuana still at 62.3%. So as far as what we're seeing, it goes back to the 30-day use. It goes back to their own personal perceptions about marijuana use, and that is an area of concern, but we'll be working through community partnerships, working with the school systems to be able to address that need. Prescription drugs also staying pretty high at 88.4%.
So one of the things, and all of you have new sheets on this, on the gender differences that exist. And one of the things that surprised us in our 2011 survey were the differences between boys and girls. We had focused an awful lot of attention over the past several years with Title IX and with a lot of programs geared toward girls. And you can see from the developmental assets, as you go through all 40, boys lead girls with developmental assets in only 3 of the 40 categories. On 37 of them, actually on about 25 of them, the young females have higher scores than the boys do, and the rest of them, the last 10 or 12, they're about the same. The only 3 areas where young men exceed the young women are, they feel safer than the young women do, which makes some sense, possibly because of size and how they're threatened by others, and probably least threatened. A second area is their self-esteem. Women usually smile at this a little bit, is that no matter how badly young males are doing, we always think we're doing better, you know. And if you take a look at self-esteem and you take a look at sense of purpose and drive and a positive view of personal future, those are all things that a guy by the name of Daniel Goffman, who wrote about in terms of social emotional intelligence a long time ago, that these are a number of the things where people get ahead in business and things like that, that is not based on, you know, sort of all the other assets you end up having in the world. So we still have work to do with the young women on those things, about them feeling better about themselves. We've done a program at RISAP for years called Finding Your Voice that the Fairfield students have been very involved in, and we continue to do a lot of things that focus on females, but we've got to spend some time on the young males. And as you dig into this data, you will see percentage differences of 10, 15, 20% on some items. Take a look at the amount of homework. Young people, young women are much more serious about academics and their academic work than females are. They're doing better in school in terms of getting mostly A's on their report card, you know. But they care more for others. They find extreme importance. Now, we've always looked at women as being the caring group of people, but we've, you know, and we've made some improvements with young men in that area as well. But I won't go into all of these, but I think it's time to spend a little bit of special attention on our young men, you know, as well as our young women. They're, you know, as we take a look at high school graduation rates and things like that, we're looking at the number of people who enter into college, but not only get into college, but stay in college. Young women are graduating at a rate almost 40% higher than young men are right now. I have an engineering degree in a past life, and when I was at Penn State getting my engineering degree, we had 4 young women in a class of about 1,200 engineers. Today, it's 50-50. And so, we've made some major changes in terms of where we are there. The next slide is on, and the next one. We also took a look at a number of other, one more, you're not there yet, risk-taking behaviors. We've already talked about the ones here to a great degree about alcohol, getting drunk once or more in the last 2 weeks, 16%. That's a percentage that's gone down a little bit, but it's a percentage that's of concern to us. Smoking cigarettes, we know we're way down there. Using marijuana, around 15%. Illicit drug use in the last 12 months, 2%. Next one. And, was that the next one?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to go back into some of the supplemental questions that we've asked. So as far as the prescription drug, as I stated before, we didn't have a lot of information about what's been going on with our young people, so we figured that this would be a great opportunity to ask. We're having young people during a 12-month period, really having them respond to them being at a party and seeing other young people taking prescription drugs which were not prescribed to them, just to make sure that there weren't improper use. Some of us have heard of farm parties, to see if that is a trend, if young people are reporting that, because obviously we know that when there is prescription drugs and when they are not being used properly, that may mean, and most often means, that there are other substances that are available to young people. So as far as their answer response go, 81% say that they have never, during this 12-month period, been to a party where that has happened. And there are varying degrees moving off from that. So we have about a 19% gap with young people reporting that this has at least happened once. So that is another thing that we have taking into consideration when we're asking young people these questions. The other issue that has especially come up within Fairfield County is that as far as codes of conduct go, that there has always been a long-standing rule about tobacco use. But e-cigarettes, is it a cigarette? Is it vapor? What's in it? Isn't it just water? I don't know what's in it. And a lot of us professionally, since it is such an emerging trend, are still trying to figure out what is actually in these things. This was also another great opportunity to see where young people stood on this issue. As far as lifetime, have you ever used an electronic cigarette? 25% are responding that yes, they have, whereas 74.8 say no. This has also been a concern throughout our region when talking about updating the codes of conduct to make sure that this is something that is clearly written within the discipline codes for young people. As far as 12-month use with e-cigarettes, still predominantly a large number of young people are not, at about 74%, but we see that young people have experimented at least once in varying degrees, so there still is about that 27% gap of young people reporting the 12-month use.
One of the things we do know about e-cigarettes, I have a couple of people in the office who are quitting smoking and using e-cigarettes to do that. The one thing that we do know that's in e-cigarettes is nicotine. and the nicotine is there in varying amounts. If you're quitting smoking, the nicotine is there at the beginning about at the same rate that's in a cigarette, and then it keeps getting reduced. You can reduce it yourself and eventually not use at all. So, and we also know from our past history that of all the drugs we know of, nicotine is probably the most addictive of all of them. That includes heroin, cocaine, and all of the other things. The other thing I'd like to say about the prescription drugs that are scary to us all are the opiates, the oxys, the OxyContins, the Percocets, and things like that. And addictions to those particular drugs can be worse, detoxing from those drugs than from most of the other drugs. They have a very negative effect on the body, so. Okay, we take a look at other risky behaviors too. We're taking a look at shoplifting, vandalism, group fighting, because we wanted to take a look at sort of gang behavior of people ganging up on people, carrying a weapon for protection, threatening physical harm to someone in the last 12 months. Sometimes this can be defined as bullying. Sometimes it can just be, you got real angry with somebody and you threatened them. You can take a look at the figures that are up there. Young people are into risk-taking behaviors. They're going to take chances. They're going to try to get away with things. That's part of the experimentation. We hope that they don't harm themselves. And, it's like among most adults, a number of us have probably done these things in our lifetime. Hopefully, lucky enough not to get caught at it, or it was something that was passing in our life. We asked some supplemental questions about social media. You can see here that since the start of the school year, I've seen posts where kids from my school were insulted, teased, harassed, or abused by other students. So you've got about 1 in 5 students agreeing with that statement, and you've got 37% somewhat agreeing with it, and then you have people that are disagreeing with it. This whole thing about people being abused, teased, insulted on social media, is really a big deal, and it's something, that we need to look at. This is the first time we've ever looked at this data, so we don't have trend data on it. But when we talk to young people about being on social media, they are spending a lot of time there. We didn't put the other slide in on social media. This is the next question. Okay. And then we looked at other risk-taking behaviors. Young people having sexual intercourse ever. 16% total between 7th grade and 12th grade. It's about 2% of 7th graders. It's about 40% of high school seniors. Those figures are dropping, and they've been dropping over the past 3 to 5 years. We've taken a look at gambling behavior among young people, 20% in the last 12 months. Not that there's anything wrong with gambling per se, but with some people it becomes problematic, because of gambling for money and getting in serious debt because of it. The next 2 relate to young people's mental health. We ask people about feeling depressed, sad, most or all the time, around 12%. Attempted suicide 1 or more times, 7%. Those figures tend to be a little higher than we assume, with young people, but they're pretty common. We've got figures on attempted suicide that range from around 5% to about 15%, across the country when these are done. And about 10% of young people have eating disorders.
So I will quickly respond to especially the mental health concerns and what we're talking and what we are in the process as a community of doing, of what supports we're giving to young people. Through the Fairfield Community Coalition, last year they were provided with a $2,500 mini grant to really start the effort with the suicide prevention. There are people within the community, whether it be faith, prevention, local government, who are all trained in a curriculum, well, not necessarily curriculum, it's a gatekeeper training on question, persuade, refer, QPR, which is something that is rolled out not just last year, but is a continuing effort. So when we are looking at these numbers, they do seem incredibly daunting, and it reaches at your heartstrings to see that there are young people out there that do feel this way. But we are looking to address this and continue to address this in the future, and to be able to build an infrastructure within Fairfield to be able to respond if there are young people who are in need.
Yeah, what's that next one? So, these are 4 deficits that are very important in terms of taking a look at whether young people are at risk or not. Alone at home, more than 3 hours a day by themselves, 24% of young people. Surprisingly, the highest group here are not high school seniors. They're actually the 9th and 10th graders tend to spend more time at home alone than the older students do. TV exposure has come down quite a bit at 22%, but that probably has a lot to do with social media. When we look at it, young people have experienced physical abuse, 17% of them. This can be from peers, it can be from parents, it can be from siblings when we're looking at it. And 45% of your young people have been to a party where there was alcohol in the last 12 months. We asked one other question about the social media, and this was how much time young people are actually spending on social media. A very small percentage, 7%, say they spent none. 15, 16% less than an hour, about 20%, 2 hours, approaching 25%, 3 hours in the 12% range, and about 20% 4 hours. The question we did not ask that we need to do as follow-up for this is that some of this time might be assigned, in classes and things like that. And so we need to dig a little bit deeper about this. So that'll come up the next time we do the surveys. Okay, now we'll start going into the wrapping up of this whole thing. There are 8 indicators of thriving youth. So if we do well in these 8 areas and they encompass all of the assets we talked about earlier, young people that do well in school, who exhibit leadership wherever it is, in the community, in their family, in their groups that they're in, young people who help others informally, that resist danger, that value diversity, control their impulsive behaviors, maintain good personal health, and overcome adversity tend to do a lot better than other people do. The data we have on this is that succeeds in school, and this is a real high standard. This means getting mostly A's. Those 36% of the young people reported got mostly A's. When I take a look at succeeding in school, we survey kids that have developmental disabilities, a whole range of things, and someone with a developmental disability getting C's might be succeeding, or doing to the best of their ability. So we need to look deeper at that. Helping others, very high. And this is, as I said, this is helping family members, but it might also go to being involved in something in the community, working at a homeless shelter, something like that. Valuing diversity, 57%. This is very important because the future workplaces are going to be incredibly diverse. We're operating in a very diverse society, and so young people having a value about that. Our suburban communities have a little more of a challenge there because the communities are not as diverse. Well, Bridgeport has the opposite problem because it doesn't have diversity either. It's got diversity of a lot of different cultures, but a smaller number of Caucasian people, Maintaining good health, very important. Young people, 68% report that they do physical exercise and things like that. Very high percentage of young people exhibiting leadership wherever it is. Resisting danger, I think it's a mark of adolescence to not resist danger. We like dangerous things when we're kids, and so hopefully they don't do themselves harm. Delaying gratification, 54%, actually pretty high when we take a look at it. And resilience, overcoming adversity, a very important thing in young people. When they get down, what do they do to bounce back? How do we help them bounce back? Almost 75%. So we're good in that area as well. So this is your asset challenge in Fairfield. You've got more than 50% have more than 20 assets, and that's what we're aiming for, is about 20. So you've got 56%, 45% between 11 and 20, 11% between 31 and 40. 7% of your population has 0 to 10. If you looked at those slides before that we were looking at, this is the most at-risk group. They're the ones that would most tend to be involved in alcohol and drugs and involved in the risky behaviors. That's clear in the data. And then the next riskiest group are the ones between 11 and 20 assets. Next one. So, we were asked earlier, or we weren't asked, I think as part of the initial comments coming in here, do we make recommendations about what you do as a community? We've actually shied away from making recommendations because this is your profile of your young people in Fairfield. We make this presentation to any group that wants to hear it. We already have a presentation set up with the Ludlow PTA that's coming up. Fairfield Cares and others will all get this data, you know, and it's really what's important to you, what jumps out at you in this data. And so this is just a summary of taking a look at things, and when you take a look at the big report we have in the entire survey, the Search Institute has all kinds of things, you know, to build assets in young people. So that's where we're focused. And so when I had one last. Yeah, keep going. So it's all about assets, and so you can also go to the next one. So if you're interested in hearing more about this, people in the audience behind us, there's my and Denique's information to get a hold of us. We'll do everything we can. 3 years ago, when we released the survey data, I think I made 45 presentations in Greater Bridgeport about this data. You know, I made at least 6 in Fairfield during that time. This year, I have the wonderful thing of having a partner in crime, in Denique, who's going to share this with me. So we'll either be able to do more, or we'll at least be able to do that and get out with you. We were also asked about things that we're already doing. A lot of the things that we talk about here have to do with social emotional development in young people, what Denique talked about earlier with suicide prevention and positive mental health training that's gone on, and we've already trained people in Fairfield. We trained them as trainers, and so they're going to be able to do this in the community. We have been doing something in Bridgeport for the last 4 years, something called the Ruler and Safe Dates, which is a healthy relationships curriculum and something that reduces bullying and improves school climate, called the Ruler. We've been asked by people in Fairfield to do that. We've also been asked in Stratford. We've got 60 AmeriCorps members at RISAP who will be doing that curriculum in Bridgeport, Stratford, and Fairfield this year after we make the final arrangements on that. The other thing you should know here in Fairfield, that about last year, out of the 60 AmeriCorps members that we had, 28 of those young adults were from Fairfield, you know, and had joined our program for that work. I was trying to think of some of the other things that are going on. One of the big things that goes on with this data, and we're so pleased this year, is that a lot of the communities use the data when they are looking for other funds, you know, going to foundations, to government, and places like that. The data is incredibly rich, and we've seen its use. RISAP got a grant from the federal government called Drug-Free Communities that we had for 10 years that ran out around 5 years ago at RISAP. Using this data, Bridgeport has gotten a grant, and just in the last few days, it was announced that Fairfield and Trumbull also got Drug-Free Communities. Stratford, excuse me, Fairfield didn't get it. Fairfield hadn't applied, but it's a message to you to apply, because 2 suburban communities, Stratford and Trumbull, have gotten the grants, and that's $125,000 a year geared toward prevention efforts and positive youth development efforts, you know, in your communities. And so you've got, I'm going to present this to Dr. Teitel. This will all be available, you know, in the superintendent's office. The reports that we have and the larger report with all the questions will all be online at our website. The boards of ed, when we give this to them, it's usually on their Board of Ed sites as well. And so you'll have that data. feel like we've talked a long time. So, questions?
I'll start over on this side of the table if people have questions.
I'll take this off your hands.
Thank you very much for a comprehensive report and walk through 19 pages of slides, about 38 slides. So I'm glad that you didn't walk through every page of this document, but I am sure that a lot of the agencies that you mentioned, as well as the staff from our school district, will be poring over all of those individual pages. Let me see if board members have a question for the two of you at the moment. I'll just go around the table. Mr. Patton, do you have any, time is going, but please ask.
No direct questions. I don't think this is fairly comprehensive, more of a comment in terms of, I'm sure that this information may actually be in the giant phone book that you're going to present to Dr. Title. But on page 6, you have like the alcohol trend data with a graph. And the one thing that I think would be useful in your presentations, as you go through the year, would be certainly more comparisons over time, not just from 2012 to 14, but over as back as far as you can go. So these just a standard bar graph, just so you can see over the last 10 years, that you can see alcohol trend data is going down. I'd like to see similar information for all the other assets that are in here. So that's about it.
Thank you. Mr. Llewellyn.
Actually, I think this was a fabulous presentation, thank you. And I liked the trending quite a bit, and it was very specific. Now, can this data, or in the as Mr. Patton refers to it, the phone book, does that break it down by school? So the individual schools, like Mr. Convertito mentioned earlier, can kind of bring that back into their school improvement?
It's not broken down by school. It is broken down by grade level. We did all 5 secondary schools in Fairfield, were part of the study, but that's all aggregated together.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And then, as I was going through, I saw one that actually would be interesting to test. And I don't know if anyone's ever tested it for you. Succeeds in school, gets mostly A's on report cards, the 28 and the 45%.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had a district go actually back into their system, query it for you, and validate, whether what people are reporting is what it is, or would you like to have that happen? Because I think that would be a really easy one to go in and check. It helps validate
We
data.
can do that. The Search Institute actually has validated, they've gone back into all these questions and have done that kind of digging about it. Self-reporting is actually incredibly accurate, on the part of young people. It's a plus and minus 5%.
Right.
On anything. They said anything in here probably has plus or 5 percentage points. And so even if you were looking at trend data, a 35% one year and a 40% the next year may not mean a lot, in terms of where you are. But the accuracy is really quite close on the self-reporting of young people.
Okay.
We throw out a certain number of surveys every year because sometimes a young person will just sit down and check off strongly agree to like 30 questions in a row. Well, if they do that, that question is gone.
Right.
They've invalidated it themselves. And we in the past, I don't think we did it with this particular survey, but we would put drugs down that in fact don't exist. And so if a young person checked off that they'd used a drug that didn't exist, their survey would be eliminated as well.
But
But there aren't many of those. Surprisingly, there are very few. We have young people that go looking for those drugs afterwards to see where they are.
So you're saying any delta more than 5% should be something to look at, but 5 and lower is, or do you think that there's a consistency in?
Well, if the 5 and lower is consistent, like we had a very stubborn figure about 30-day alcohol use for years, and it's only, we haven't taken a close look at the other communities yet, but your alcohol data is pretty significant in being reduced. And one of the big things, Danique talked about this earlier, is this 9th grade forum. When there's a 9th grade forum done in a community, that seems to have an impact, where parents and their children, as they're entering ninth grade, come to a forum about alcohol use and the risk of using it, and then focusing also some of the assets into that discussion, that since the communities have been doing that, Trumbull actually initiated that a few years back, and their alcohol data has been trending downward. And the other thing, when communities focus attention on a particular issue, and bring attention to it, no matter what it is, it seems like it trends in a more positive direction as well.
Right.
Paying attention is important.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
welcome.
Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, thank you as well. This was really very thorough and interesting. I guess one question that I was just wondering about, just when we're talking about, say, the alcohol use, that's across 7 through 12, so it's all together. I mean, I think what would be interesting to see is how, I'm assuming that 7th and 8th would be the lowest by far. And I think when you talk about the freshman forum, it would also be interesting to see maybe the freshman is lower, but then as you get further away from the freshman forum, students start to say, oh, well, that was freshman year, and now I'm older, and I'm going to college next year. It would just be interesting to see how it's broken out per grade for a lot of these.
Within the phone book,
Yeah,
the
it's
complete
in there.
guide,
Got
it is
Okay.
included in there.
Yeah.
But what we've historically seen and what preceded the idea of the freshman forum was that there were these large jumps at these transitional years. So the 9th grade forum came about because there was the significant jump at the 8th grade level based on the data. But we also do see that when young people are at about sophomore year, kind of the springtime, there's another significant jump that happens. But all of the trend, all of the data specific to, there is a breakdown between males and females for each question, and then for each grade level, as far as where young people are reporting.
Okay, great, thank you. And also, I guess just through the chair to Dr. Teitel, do we know when and how much of this will be available on our website?
Could I, before Dr. Teitel answers that question, I presume that beyond the phone book that you actually have this electronically?
We do.
Okay,
So it
so
can be
based on that,
Yeah, all of the data here is electronic. The
Right, so
supplemental
it's very easy to
survey, the
post.
PowerPoint we gave you, and the Search Institute's
Right.
thing.
so probably a few days after we get it from you electronically, we'll be able to probably post it on the website.
Great, thank you.
And we'll put it up on our website. We'll put both up on our website at riasap.org.
Okay, so it'll be accessible to anyone who wishes to see it
Right.
fairly soon online. Great, thank you.
Ms. Cornell?
Thank you, that was wonderful, and I think there was some surprises for me, so I always find that interesting. There's just a few things I'd like to understand, if I may. On page 5, the slide of 4 core measures in the past 30-day use, was there a reason that you didn't use other? Because there's other drugs besides marijuana. Prescription, there's other. There's a lot of other going on in this area. So I was just wondering why that was, obviously was something that's been discussed. So I was just wondering why other was left out.
So, great question. So when we're talking about the 4 core measures, these are what the federal government is really trying to narrow down. Now, in the larger survey, young people are responding to questions other than these 4 substances, but for a lot of federal reporting for specific grants that are offered, that these are the 4 drugs of interest that are particularly of interest to the federal government. But that's not excluding that there are other questions pertaining to other drugs within the overall survey.
And one of the things that we looked at is that if you're reading about trending nationally, is that there's more heroin use in the suburbs now. And it's not necessarily the needles, it's going in powdered form, and then young people who have gotten hooked on the powdered form then will switch to the needles. I think we did ask a question about heroin. I saw something like around 1 or 2% have experimented with it. And so, I mean, it's here, and we have anecdotally been at meetings in our suburban communities, and we have superintendents and police departments who are talking about the availability of heroin in the suburbs.
I think that
Marijuana is actually more expensive now than heroin, by quite a bit.
that was That was why I was asking, because it seemed to be so prevalent in the suburbs, unfortunately.
And the availability of the prescription drugs, especially the opiates, they stand a chance of being abused to a very high degree. I mean, you can crush and snort, the various opiates as well.
Thank you for
Or
that
by
education.
heating them, you turn to fluid.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Too much information.
I think it's also because it sits in most parents, unfortunately, medicine cabinets. And again, this may be the same reason on page 6, you ask about the Fairfield Parent Survey, when parents were asked to respond in the past 30 days. But there's no box for, my child didn't do anything wrong.
Now, as far as the Fairfield Parent Survey, that wasn't administered through us. What I felt was necessary within this presentation, and what we've continued to do throughout all of the communities, is to make all these presentations usable for the communities that they're in. So if there were other data points that we were able to bring in from other sources, that was the opportunity to do so. But if you do have a more specific question about the Fairfield Parent Survey, then that would be more directly related to positive directions and the work of Wendy Bentavagna.
And that's true in all the communities, by the way. It's like Trumbull and Stratford have had special alcohol prevention grants over the past several years, and so they do their own surveys around alcohol, and we will use that data in our survey as well when we do those communities.
Last question. One of the things that you mentioned, that 2 other surrounding areas were able to get a grant as a result of that, which I think is wonderful. What is that the main purpose of collecting this data? Then what is it?
No, the primary purpose is to give you a profile of your young people and for you to discuss the information that's in front of you and to figure out what concerns you, in the data itself. Karen, are you still here? Yeah. So Karen Campbell, for example, in the Fairfield Public Schools will comb through this data to a great degree, and she will use that in health classes.
We'll look at our health curriculum, we use the data in our freshman forum.
So if it's going to be a more than one-word answer, you really ought to join at the microphone for the benefit of the TV audience. Sorry to call you up here, but nonetheless.
Rest for the TV audience.
Sorry, Karen.
We use the data in many ways. You've already heard about the freshman forum. In fact, the question about the grade level usage, that's one of the slides that I talk about with high school parents, is to let them know that most of our students are not drinking, but too many are. And I show them the percentage of drinking in 9th grade versus drinking in 12th grade, the alarming increase that we see over the 4 years. So that's just one data point. I talk to them about parent perception, that parents who have clear rules around drinking, that their students drink less. That's valuable information for parents. Again, we'll look at our health curriculum. We'll use some of this information when we talk to our students so they understand, because I'm sure you've heard, students will tell parents, well, Mom, everybody drinks. Well, everybody doesn't drink. So it's important that students have accurate information about what their friends are doing. We will use the public school system. We're all members of the Fairfield Cares, our community coalition, so our task force will also use this data to look at what prevention initiatives, we're going to move forward on. So do we continue with alcohol awareness now, or do we have to start to take a look at marijuana use? So it's incredibly helpful data in many, many, many ways.
Thank you.
So, Karen, can you just tell folks your name and job within the school system?
My name is Karen Campbell. I'm the Director of Pupil Services and School Counseling at Fairfield Ward High School.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Convertito, anything?
Yes. One, thank you for the presentation. I have just one question, I guess through the chair, and it's probably going to be to Dr. Leonardi. What's always disturbing to me is these kids that have no assets and, there seems to be a direct correlation there with actually slide 5, or the first slide on page 16, with children that have attempted suicide, because it's exactly the same percentage. Do we have a means by which we at least try to identify those kids and help them?
So perhaps you could trade seats
Gladly.
and introduce yourself, if you would, and then answer the question.
Hi, Andrea Leonardi, Director of Special Education and Pupil Services. We have had emerging opportunities to look at ways to screen youngsters. So we've been trying over the past couple of years to actually provide some screening tools at the high school level to look at anxiety, depression, connectedness, to try to identify and help kids self-identify where they have weaknesses in those areas, and resiliency, and then working to build those core skills with those kids. We continue to try to further develop that. As you know, we've seen, and we've been talking about at the table here for a couple of years now, the numbers of students who are experiencing mental illness, and the impact of that on overall achievement, and their overall life skills. So we work with the high schools at that. We need to drag it down to the middle schools and even into the elementaries. So we're looking at that in a kind of research and development way. But we have a screening tool that we use at the high school level.
If I could just follow up
Please
again
do.
through the chair. As far as those kids who identify themselves with zero assets, is there any way that we can take any, I mean, my calculation on that is, from the middle school to the high school level, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 55 kids. Now, again, I understand it's a self-identification, but is there ways that, or means that we have to try and get to those kids before it becomes an issue?
Yes, I think we look to our school counselors and our mental health professionals at the building level, psychologists, social workers, and school counselors, working in collaboration. We work with all teachers to understand the signs, the soft signs of anxiety, depression, and assorted other mental illness issues, so that they report to us and make referrals to us. Certainly, you see it behaviorally. You see a number of challenges academically and behaviorally, isolationism. You see a number of things that happen with kids, and we try to train all of the adults to be mindful, to look to any behavior that's kind of outside or changes in behavior. If students are moving along quite smoothly and all of a sudden there's a rapid decline, or there's a decline in personal hygiene, or there's a change in demeanor, that we look to help people understand that that could be a sign that a child is struggling, and to make referrals to the proper resources within the schools.
Mr. Carvertino, there's one other piece of that from the Search Institute has taken a look at this, that in fact no child has no assets. But the young people that Dr. Leonardi are talking about, the young people who are severely depressed and possibly suicidal, get to the point of believing they have no assets.
I understand it's a self-perception. Right.
Yeah, it's a self-perception. And so, it takes a lot of work on the part of professionals like her and like many others to, get young people to the point where they're recognizing that they do some things well, and we end up building on those things later on. So.
Thank you.
Mrs. Lou McCormick, any final questions? I say final questions. I know that we have a member of our Board of Selectmen here who is an ex officio member of the board, so in the event that you want to ask the final question, I'll come to you next. Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I only have one question. I found it very informative and interesting what you presented to us, so thank you very much. And I really appreciated the trend information. I think the trend information is very telling. The other piece of that I think would be interesting also to look at that and kind of complement it is there a way to look at comparative data, I guess, to see how we compare versus the rest of Southern Fairfield versus Connecticut? I don't even know if it extends beyond that, to see if there are things that are very low in our district or very high on a relative basis.
Well, you'll be able to see a lot of that yourself. We purposefully have sort of shied away from I don't want to say pitting communities against each other, in terms of things. We've reported things in the past, sometimes to our advantage. I remember a couple of years back, it's got to be 6 or 7 years, when we reported that Trumbull had the highest youth alcohol rates of anybody in our region. They jumped on it, that's when they started their parent forum, they got the grant to do the underage alcohol use prevention stuff, and, they went from 45% to 25% over the course of 3 years.
So that relative information is really valuable because it can
Now,
cause
you'll
action,
be able to get that comparative information because we'll be doing this presentation in the other 4 communities as well. So it'll all be up on their websites the same way you do it here. But we've been a little bit shy about doing comparative
Aggregating it.
information
Right, so
between
you just leave
communities.
it and then let people go
That's
and
right.
find it, I see.
That's right. So, and also, you can look at the national data from the Search Institute's website. They aggregate this data for the entire country. We do some things a lot better in Connecticut than they do in other parts of the country, and we do some things a lot worse, so.
If you saw something that was unusual, would you bring it to the attention? You would?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, there's nothing that leaps at us in the Fairfield data that makes you particularly unusual from another community.
So with adequate warning, does the Selectwoman, ex officio member, have a comment or question you wish to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak as an ex officio member. I just want to reinforce and thank the folks from RIASAP and just piggyback on what Mrs. Campbell said, that we at Fairfield Cares, Wendy Bentavagna and I as co-chairs, certainly take the partnership with the school community very seriously, and will continue to work with our police department, our fire department, our library, parks and rec, and others, as well as other schools in the community, private schools, to work together to address this. The data is extremely helpful to us, so thank you for the time and attention to this, and we look forward to working together. Thank you.
Okay, only my comment on building on Ms. Carnell's question, I think. Having served on a community-based service agency for a number of years, the number one purpose of this and use of this is in designing and developing programs that help kids and families become stronger. Yes, it's used to seek grants, but that's ancillary for the purpose of the grant, which is to help design programs that serve children. So probably I think the most valuable use of this is in the program design area. So thank you again for coming. We look forward to hearing from you a couple of 3 years from now when this comes up again, and we welcome you to Fairfield anytime to help our various community agencies benefit from this material.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Mr. Dwyer.
Okay, so we're moving on to item 6, approval of the minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, our chair of the policy committee is here, so we can go directly to that. Thank you for catching that. Item number 5, approval of 2 policies which are fairly minor in nature, fixing up. And so I'll ask the chair, unless the chair of the policy committee wants to rely on the 2 members who were kind of ready to do this in the event she wasn't able to get here. What is your desire?
No, I mean, as always, I'd ask for questions, didn't get any, but quite frankly, didn't expect any from the board members. It was fairly straightforward, but, again, this is regarding the expulsion report and the timing of it for the board members.
Okay, so
and
let me...
then the health assessment.
So you'll speak to it, so let me first get the one motion on the table, and then we'll do the second motion. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve policy 5119, students, student discipline, suspension, expulsion. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Convertito, seconded by Mrs. Gerber. You have the floor on that motion, on that particular motion and policy.
This was just a matter of bringing the policy in line with what quickly emerged as the practice, and which seemed, quite frankly, the most practical and common sense approach to this timing. So, any questions?
Any comment that you want to make, Mr. Convertito? No? Any questions from the board? No questions? To the public? Any members of the public? This is a voting item on policy 5119. Any members of the public wish to speak on this policy? None, so we'll go back to the board for a vote. All in favor of the policy, please raise your hand. We have a unanimous vote, absent Mr. Llewellyn, who stepped out at the moment. So that's 7-0. Okay, so now we'll deal with item B, recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy 5510, students' welfare health assessments. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Convertito, seconded by Mrs. Gerber. Mr. Convertito, you made the motion, so do you have any comments you wish to make?
No, I think we explained the policy changes last week. They're really
Gerber?
dictated by statute.
Well, I guess just the one question that actually Mr. Convertito had brought up regarding, like, the students this year who were in ninth grade.
The transition
The
from ninth to
transition,
10th grade.
Just in terms of that, I didn't know if there was
Have
any.
the staff had a chance to think of that in terms of the testing, that the ninth graders won't have had the test, and the other way around?
Exam, medical exam.
The medical. Yeah, so the next year will be a double-up year?
Right, that's correct.
And that's the assumption that we're working on?
Yes.
That next year we'll test both ninth and 10th so that they're caught up?
Right.
So that answers, I think, thank you for reminding us of that question. Any other comments or questions from board members? If not, we'll go to the public. Any members of the public wish to make a comment on this particular policy change? Hearing none, we'll go back to the board. Please, all in favor with the recommended motion to approve policy 5510, please raise your hand. We have unanimous, and this time it's 8-0. So thank you. 10:22. So now we're on to the approval of the minutes. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of September 9th, 2014. I should have said that the minutes ought to include the fact that that was my youngest son's birthday, but I suppose that that's not an issue. Do we have a motion on the approval of the minutes? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli? Mrs. Gerber? Any questions on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, it's unanimous, with 7-0, Mr. Convertito having to leave. So now we're on to the superintendent's report.
A few quick updates. I'll apologize for this first one in case a board member was going to do it under open board comment. I sent you an email today, you might not have seen it, and I put it on a Twitter account that the Time Magazine, Money Magazine has done a ranking of the top, they had listed the top 50 places to live in the country for cities and towns our size, and only two communities in Connecticut made the top 50, and we were one of them at number 44. The other one was West Hartford at number 45. No other Connecticut town was listed there. I've sent you the link so you can go through and see the whole thing. And the blurb that they wrote up, in fact, makes reference to our schools, specifically that both our high schools are in the top 25 in the state. So I thought that was a nice feather in our cap. A few updates on some items. One was with respect to new hires, the board in the past has wanted to see, and we'll do this again, but we'll wait till after October 1, we'll have it for sure. We'll give you the sort of the new hire experience grid that shows the percentage of teachers hired with experience and degrees and so forth, masters, bachelors, and so forth. I will say that, just to give you a preview of coming attractions, that more than 50% of the new hires this year were experienced teachers. So the notion that we only hire people at step 1 is not borne out by the data. And the second thing I also want to point out, since it was mentioned at an earlier meeting, there has been no policy change with respect to hiring teachers with bachelor's degrees. That's never been a policy or practice in the district. I checked with the prior director of human resources and superintendent, and I worked with her for 2 years. So basically, that's erroneous information. There's no change in that. But I'll get you the data on that. Along with some enrollment data, We will give you the October 1 numbers shortly after October 1. That's the official. And we'll be able to include in that another chart that I don't think you've seen before, which will compare the actual enrollment by level to the projections. So you'll actually be able to see total projected enrollment that we used when we built the budget versus actual by level and by school. And it's taking us longer than I thought. This turned out to be a much more labor-intensive project. We'll also include in that same packet the private school data. It's just grinding work. It's getting in the database, and we have a number of people, and we're still doing registrations. We still have people who aren't here, and we're trying to find out where did they go, because some people don't tell us where they're going, and we're trying to follow up with that. So again, shortly after October 1st, I'll get you a packet with enrollment data, the private school data, both exiting and returning, enrollment data compared to projections, and the information on the hires. October 1st, I think, is a Wednesday. I doubt we'll be able to do that by the Friday packet, because we have to verify the October 1 enrollment. So, but we won't wait till the following Friday. If it's ready on Tuesday, I'll get it out on Tuesday. So as soon as I have it, I'll get it out in an email, we'll post it so everybody can have it, okay? So we'll do that. And I'm still waiting for, contacted CABE about the question that was raised about the strategic school profiles and our legal obligations. She's doing research for us on that. That's included in our fees, so there's no extra charge for that. She told me the state won't give us one, but she'll call over there and check with them. So as soon as I get, I'll get an email from CABE on that. As soon as I get it, we'll ship it out. I think that's probably about a week away, but it's in the process. Okay? That's my report.
Questions for the superintendent on those 5 items? Mrs. Lou McCormick.
Yeah, on those 5, I have an update question. I was wondering if you could provide us with an update on the physics teacher situation in the high school.
Okay, so normally our superintendent's report, we ask to have board members ask questions about the topics that are raised during the superintendent's report, because we don't expect any of our staff or our superintendent to be able to be conversant on all sorts of issues at one time. So if you want to follow up on that since our last report, feel free to talk to Dr. Title directly.
It's improving.
That's just good for the public to know. I think people are concerned, so that would be a good thing to report on.
Yep. Other questions of our superintendent, Mr. Llewellyn?
Actually, I've got 2 quick ones. One is we heard about the data teams today and the iReady. We've seen that kind of out in the middle schools and the elementary schools.
Right.
Does it offer a ability to do ELA, or is it solely math, or is that just what we've purchased?
Right. We have we're just using the math part of it. There is an ELA part, but we're using a different national assessment in reading that the reading people preferred over iReady.
And which one's that one?
That's from Fontes and Pinnell.
Do you know?
They're authors. I don't know enough about it. Again, this is another topic.
Just asking.
Yeah, we can get the information to you. It's going to, and you'll see it when we do our proposed measures of student progress. They're both, they both have national, not norms is the wrong word, but they're national tests.
And Fontes and Pinnell is like Heinemann?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll have time to get into it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like it's going to be tested periodically, so I think that's a good thing that the board can now see kind of progress as it moves across the year. My other question for you is, we received in our Friday packet quite a few pages as it relates to the school climate survey. Is this going to be discussed prior to its going out? Because does the board need to approve surveys prior to them going out?
Go ahead.
Well, the school climate survey has not been approved by the board in the past. That's a requirement from the state, but Andrea's going through the regular procedures of vetting it in the community, so it's out there. I don't know if you want to say anything about it.
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
As you saw on the memo, I suggested there'll be an open, the survey will be open for parents to come in and take a look at for the first 2 weeks of October before the survey goes into the field. I believe it's October 20th for 2 weeks. and that will be done through IC. So if you have any questions about the memo, or if people have questions about, I tried to give you a sense of process,
Right.
how we went through the process as a subcommittee of our school climate district team, and then as the full school district team was unanimous in its approval. If you have questions about the process or
Sure.
other questions.
So it's going through IC, which is a log-on-based system, right?
Is a?
Log-on-based system?
Yes.
So isn't the school climate supposed to be anonymous?
It is anonymous. There's a methodology within, and I don't have the technical terms, so forgive me. There's a methodology where we will be able to see who filled out the surveys, but we will not be able to see what their responses were. Once the response goes into the server, it is no longer attributable to an IP address. So we'll be able to see who's filling out the survey, but not what their responses were to the survey. That's how I understand it.
And this whole thing is going to go before our next board meeting, it sounds like. It'll be rolled out. When did you say the dates were?
October
Versus-
20th to the 31st is the survey window.
And our next meeting is?
But in answer to your original question, the board has not undertaken to review every survey that is distributed to students.
And what is the policy on that?
We budget to pay for it and to include it, but we do not, we leave to management to conduct them.
I thought there was a policy, though, on approving surveys.
That's on external surveys? This
I
is
thought
an
it was any
internal
non-educational survey. I thought it was any survey that didn't have to do with direct instruction.
My understanding of the policy is that this policy is about external surveys of students, like RISAP, that internal surveys, in accordance with state statute or required by state statute, surveys that are created for and put into the field by the Fairfield Public Schools are not subject to the same policy, but
So you may want to follow up with that.
I was going to ask, actually, if Dr. Title could follow up with the memo out to us to confirm that that's the case. Yes? Thank you. Sure. Okay. And then, but I do have a concern, whether it's perception or reality about Infinite Campus being even close to anonymous. I think that it could absolutely have an impact on the data because no one's going to actually believe that it's anonymous.
Well,
I think there
I
are
think
other
we could
tools
do
out
it in
there
a
that are
paper and
anonymous.
pencil format. I think if we do it in a paper and
Do that
pencil
too.
format, we're going to get a very low response rate, and I think we're going to miss out on an opportunity
Yeah,
to
Mr.
really
Mr.
seek a
excuse me.
full forum. But,
This is a topic that's not on the agenda, and so we need to, it may be a piece of material that was mailed to us, but it's not on our agenda, so if you have further conversation that you want on this particular topic, you ought to follow up directly with staff.
Okay, I will, but I think if you're going to send stuff out on we should add to every agenda a topic on anything that's included in the packet so that we have an opportunity to ask questions on it.
Thank you
It's
for
up
your
to the vote
comment.
of the board, Phil.
Mr. Patton, do you have any questions or comments on the superintendent's
Thank you,
report?
Andrea.
You're welcome.
Okay. Under committee and liaison reports, 28, we specifically have an update from the ad hoc committee, so Mrs. Lou McCormick, what do you have to tell us?
Sure. So we had our third ad hoc committee regarding the bylaws under discussion, and we had more public attendees, which I think was encouraging to give us kind of a broader perspective. We, just as an update, we have considered the one regarding the responsibilities of the board and have gotten feedback, do we cherry pick, this whole question of cherry picking words or not. So as a group, and I think the public seemed to be in line with that we would just simply lift language straight from CABE and just take the bullet points in their entirety to define, because everybody kind of agrees and is on board with the definition when it comes from the Board of Education Association. So that was one of the first moves, and then we moved to clarify the following language as it discusses strategic plan as well as short-term goals and objectives. And we're hoping to be able to disseminate to you some draft language so that you can also take a look at it in the meantime. And we hope to get feedback if there's things that you would recommend that we reconsider. And I also encourage people from the public to attend. It's, I think, very important that everybody be on the same page regarding the Board of Ed's function and how we can improve ourselves. We always are looking to improve ourselves, and I think the objective of this opportunity is that you can come in a less formal fashion, come in, give your commentary, and a committee can consider it and actually have a discussion if warranted. And we're hoping for the last meeting, we're hoping it's the last meeting, to be October 11th, which is a Saturday morning. I know not always convenient for everyone, but to the extent that you can make it, it would be at 9:45 a.m. We have it at the Fairfield Public Library, so everybody knows where it is, easy to access, and we look forward to getting some more public feedback. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the ad hoc committee? Ms. Maxon Connelly?
Just one quick question. Are we allowed to give feedback? I mean, would that be considered a conversation which we have to have?
Yeah.
Because I'd want to give
So-
feedback, but if we're not supposed to.
Let me answer that. I think part of what Mrs. Lou McCormick was saying is feedback from the community, but Ms. Maxon Connelly is correct that if more than 4 members of the board discuss a matter that will be a voting item, that would be a virtual meeting. And so you can give feedback at this meeting because it's a public meeting with this on the agenda. But if you started a round-robin conversation outside of a meeting, then yes, that would be a problem.
But just to clarify, if she wanted to give comments to me or to any one of the other committee members, she could do so.
Let me clarify. There's a term of art, if you called daisy chaining, where I say, okay, I'll call Jennifer, Mark will call John, and then Donna will call Eileen, and we have effectively polled the whole board, then that's a daisy chain, and that is not really allowed. So you do have to be careful.
No, absolutely, be careful, but there's 3 on, so if you were to make one comment, it would be fine because it would be
Yes,
kept within the
because that would
foursome.
be 4. Any other questions? Okay. I did want to go through some of the committee liaisons for an annual update, just because we took this off the formal agenda, and so therefore, if there are any quick updates from the various places that you're liaisons to or committees, I thought we could just do a quick round robin. And Ms. Lou McCormick, you're on finance. And the Building Project Review Committee, I don't think has been called by the first selectman, but the Finance Committee, any quick update from your attendance at those meetings?
I'm waiting for the big budget season to take, I think, a lot of time for this, though there is going to be some review of property taxes, which I think is really interesting, because they're going to be sending surveyors to walk through each house in the district, which I thought was of note, but probably not necessarily relevant to educational purposes at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Carnell, with special projects that you've been on for the past year, which has been primarily the Mill Hill roof, I think.
I think
and I've
you've
covered a
covered
couple
for
of
me.
meetings for you, but do you have any
Thank you.
comments on that? And what they might be working on in the future?
I can't comment because you've taken over the last 2. Thank you for covering for me.
Okay. Jessica, you're, Mrs. Gerber, you're on Parks and Recreation and the Fairfield Ludlow High School Building Committee and the Osborne Hill Building Committee. What would you bring us up to date on with those?
Okay, well, I'll start with Parks and Rec. Basically, just coming off a really great, successful season. Summer, the playground camps really went very well. They were very pleased with it. I'm sure everyone's aware that the 4th of July fireworks were delayed because of the weather. And kind of as a result, it was decided that for next year, the fireworks show is going to be July 3rd with the rain date of July 4th. The reason being that this is a popular date with neighboring towns, so the thought is to get the crowds down, which have been getting larger and larger, so that people who live in Fairfield can actually get a parking spot within a 5-mile radius of the beach on the day of the fireworks. Because when we had the rain delay this year, they noticed that while it was crowded, it was not as completely overwhelmingly crowded as in the past, and so the police and the fire both weighed in, and so that's going to be next year. It will be the 3rd instead of the 4th. There's a new kindergarten soccer program, which just started up this fall, in addition to the grades 1 through 8. That has been really successful. And there is a new marina manager who came on board, and he has some suggestions for the marina rules and regulations, which had recently been redone when there was not a marina manager in place. The Parks and Rec Commission formed their subcommittee and revamped a lot of the rules and regulations. Now that the new marina manager's on board, he is going to go through and make some additional suggested changes who will bring to the committee. And also the commission is very interested to see how things proceed with the Penfield building project. Okay, on to Osborne Hill. I'm sure anyone who drove down Stilson Road this summer saw that the windows were being replaced at half of the school. If you're facing Osborne Hill from the street, the left-hand side of the building, those classrooms all now have new windows and doors. They finished in time for the start of school. There was also flooring replaced, going from the main entrance back to the gym, and then the flooring of the hallway where the windows and doors were replaced. Right now, it's temporary flooring, because they did not have enough time to do that before school started. So a weekend sometime this fall, they will go in and put in the permanent flooring. Next summer, the rest of the windows and doors will be replaced, and then the gym is in the process of being remediated. The roof is going to come off sometime in the next few weeks, and then hopefully, if we have a very mild winter, it will be finished in January, which means that the portable gym will finally say goodbye to Osborne Hill, and they will actually have their gym back with a new roof, with new floors, with a new HVAC system. And then that should be it. And I guess the only question is that the connector between the annex and the main building is an ad alternate based on how much money we have in the budget. And right now, it's going to be a little tight, so they'll just have to see moving forward what happens with that. And I'm assuming if it doesn't, it will simply be something that will be added to a future renovation or renovation to Osborne Hill. Then the last one is Fairfield Ludlow High School. The board has gotten a lot of information on that. I've tried to send out all of the meeting minutes as they come in. The roof is being rebid because the bids came in too high. They're looking to have that project completed by August 2015. Windows are going out to bid in May 2015, so unfortunately that means that the windows will now not be able to be replaced that summer. It will have to be the following summer, so it will be the summers of 2016 and 17. And the cafeteria expansion classroom addition is due to go out to bid next month. And the goal is to complete it by early fall. At the last building committee, we did discuss the possibility, and this was in the minutes as well that you got in your Friday packets. There are a little bit of concerns that the cafeteria will not be completed by the beginning of next school year. Mr. Hatzis was there and did share that, his hopes were that perhaps they could start slightly earlier this spring, and so that it could be in place by the first day of school, which next year is September 3rd. So that's kind of where things are right now on that. And just as an information, you do get the minutes for these. If you ever want to come to a meeting, Ludlow meets the second Wednesday of the month at 7:30, usually at Fairfield Ludlow High School, sometimes at Town Hall. Osborne Hill usually meets at Town Hall on the third Thursday of the month. We did meet at Osborne Hill this past week, but usually it's at Town Hall. And if anyone has any questions, you can always send me an email. If I don't know the answer, I will certainly try to get it from somebody.
Go ahead.
I can't ask a question?
Yeah, please.
I'm just curious, you said that we're going out to bid at the Ludlow High School. Has the architect plans been signed off? Is that part complete yet?
It's not 100% complete yet. They're still working on that. That's why they're going to go out to bid next month.
Okay.
And the building committee is meeting October 8th. So there should be more information on that.
Last question. You said school starting September 3rd. Have we voted on the calendar?
We haven't voted on it. I am making that assumption simply because Labor Day is the latest it's going to be this coming year, as opposed to the earliest. So no, I did check on that, and the assumption is it will be September 3rd. Obviously, it could be earlier or later, depending on the whim of the board. But based on past schedules, I said the September 3rd.
Okay.
So yeah.
So we've heard about policy, but the PTA liaison, Ms. Maxim Connelly?
The PTA Council hosted their Leadership Council at the beginning of the month. I was not able to attend. I believe Mr. Drrell, I think you were there as well, and Dr. Titles. So that's always an important kickoff for all PTAs, but the only meeting they've had this month is just the executive board, so I haven't attended anything as of yet. So that will be for next month. That's usually the day before any board meeting.
13th. The 13th this month. PTA. Of October? Yeah.
Of next month?
Yeah, PTA council.
That's it.
That's it.
There you go.
Mr. Llewellyn, you're with CES and the Fairfield Ward High School Building Committee. Any comments that you wish to make?
CES has its second meeting coming up. I believe it's on the 3rd. I was unable to make the first one, but there were no meetings over the course of the summer, so there's really nothing to update as it relates to that.
Okay, Mr. Patton, you're with RTM and Scepter and Riverfield Building Committee.
We'll go in reverse order. Riverfield, you've been updated on just about a monthly basis. Tying in with the RTM just approved at the end of August, as we all know, the PCB abatement. And I think the Riverfield Building Committee, we were supposed to meet last week and the meeting got canceled because there was nothing pressing on the agenda other than some invoices that had to be approved, and those are going to be pushed off till next month. So there's nothing to report on Riverfield. The RTM is going through the usual suspects from, seems to be a never-ending story, Penfield Pavilion, redistricting of the RTM districts, not the school districts, so take a sigh of relief there. And nothing else super pressing there as far as I remember. What's next?
Scepter?
SEPTA. Actually, to Ms. Leonardi, have we had a SEPTA meeting yet? We did, okay. Which I got dropped off an email list, so I actually asked this morning, and so I will make sure that, so I obviously did not attend the first meeting this year, and I'll make sure I'll be at the next one. And I apologize for that.
Okay, the Board of Health spent a great deal of time talking last year on the nursing services at the high school and some of those issues as well. They talk about the general, their responsibility in delivering services to the wider town as well. I am a liaison to the bargaining units, which is a position that is created in the event that any of the bargaining units want to initiate a meeting with the Board of Head liaison outside of negotiations. No request has come in, so therefore no meetings were held. But as you know, there have been a series of negotiating meetings with various board members engaged in them. Mr. Fattabine is not here, and Mr. Convertito is not here, so we'll rely on him those two to bring us up to date on their respective liaison positions. So thank you for that. We're now on to open board comment. Let's see, I started over there, so let me start back over on here. Mr. Patton, anything for open board comment? You don't need to, I'm just asking. Mr. Llewellyn.
I think in reflecting on the new change in the high school schedule, and knowing that it is a...
Planning for the schedule is not like there's one change today.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct, and the fact that it's become a board goal. I think that, a lot of what was said has to do with the fact it's going to improve, student achievement, student outcome. It's my understanding that we've engaged an outside firm to help with this process. I think it would be really beneficial when the committee or whomever comes forward to present what that schedule is, to understand from those consultants what sort of impact this type of change, whatever's proposed, has had on other districts in terms of achievement. So if when that report is pulled together, I think that'd be really helpful, because I think what we need to do is keep in mind that the teachers have a lot on their plates with all of the other changes, and this is another one. So if we're able to achieve an increase in learning and success, I think that might be something well worth undertaking. But if we're doing it not for that purpose, we might want to reconsider pushing it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, any comments for open board comment? Mrs. Gerber, any comments?
Yes, sorry. I don't know if anyone's seen Fairfield Living magazine. They have an annual, sorry. Fairfield Living magazine. They have an annual profile of students in Fairfield, and there are 10 students each year. This year we have 5 from Ludlow and Ward, and just talking about their achievements on a number of levels: academic, sports, music, theater, and it's just a really great cross-section just to show all of the different ways that our students achieve in the classroom and outside. And I don't believe it's online yet. I think that you can't access online articles for the current month's issue, but starting next month, you'll be able to access it online if you don't feel like buying it, because it's actually pretty expensive. Yeah, $5.95. Anyway, so, yeah.
Ms. Carnell?
Two quick items. I know that Mr. Fatterbean had mentioned last, at the close, an open board comment about trying to orchestrate a few of the board members having lunch at the different schools. Are we going to incorporate that, or how would that evolve? Because we all thought it was a great idea, so.
Yeah, I'm following up with the superintendent on how to operationalize that. As each of you know who have tried to work out your schedules with one another and with Dr. Title and whatnot, it is a goal that we should work on, but it probably won't happen overnight simply because of our personal schedules of the 9 of us. But it's not something that's being lost.
Right, and maybe just putting out an email to the board and asking which days would be, some of us know in advance. The other thing in terms of open board comment, I had the opportunity to visit one of the other board meetings at a neighboring town. Not that I don't get enough from this board meeting, but I happened to just be there, and they had a presentation by an organization called the National Executive Service Corp, and I'm sure it's something you're familiar with. It's a volunteer of retired executives from many different areas of corporate America, and they're a nonprofit, so they shared with me that they do their work at deep discounts, just to pay for their phones, mail, things of that nature. And I'm wondering if we can invite them here to do a demonstration for the board, because they seem to touch on a lot of things, from how to run a board meeting to how a board should work to budget, to the budget book, and I think anything in between. So I don't know if you've ever had them here before, but I think it would be a great opportunity to invite them.
Okay, thank you.
Well-
As you know, with open board comment, we don't discuss items that board members bring up, because then we would be discussing a topic that's not on the agenda. So we take open board comments and then take them under consideration without a lot of conversation because of that reason. Did you have another comment that you wanted to make beyond those two?
No, I just want to know then when we can discuss it. Is that just an email chain through the board?
Send an email and you and I can chat.
No, to the board.
Okay. Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I'm just going to make note that maybe at the next board meeting, or maybe even before then, it would be greatly appreciated. It seemed like we weren't prepared to talk about the situation, but I have received, gosh, so many emails, telephone calls about 3 topics: the science teachers in the high school, the physics teacher, the iReady testing, which I guess many people were unaware of, and the tech time curriculum, all from different perspectives, concerned about different things. So I guess my comment would be perhaps we could increase the communication regarding these few topics over the next month, because I think the community seems to be interested and concerned, depending on what perspective you're coming from, on these topics. And I tend to believe in over-communication and more transparency than less when people are concerned. So I'd just like to put that out there and make a suggestion that perhaps we increase the communication on those topics in the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've gone around the table for open board comment. Adjournment, recommended motion that this regular meeting of the Board of Education adjourn. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, seconded by Mr. Llewellyn. Please raise your hand if we're all in favor. It's Mrs. Maxon Cannelli? It's unanimous. Thank you.